during these extraordinary times. Tonight will be a learning experience for all of us as we walk through how best to accomplish our governing responsibilities during this critical time. Before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging that complying with current health provisions requires us to hold a completely different board meeting than we have ever imagined before. This rule will require us to suspend certain provisions of our standard board policies. Board members, before we proceed with tonight's business, I'd like to ask that the board make a motion to suspend provisions of Board Policy 005 or any board policy that requires the board to allow for the physical presence of the board and public or real-time participation of the public so the board may conduct this meeting as outlined in our most recent public notices and in compliance with the public health guidelines.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The board will now vote to suspend provisions of Board Policy 005, 005 or any board policy that are not possible during the public health emergency.
That's just what we did.
Okay, thank you. We'll dispense with reading an individual polling of the board. I'll begin today's meeting by asking Vice President Wayne Walker to make a general announcement for our guests.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening. A representative from the Deaf Hearing Communication Center is here to provide sign language interpretation of the proceedings. And as always, we express our gratitude. The proceedings of this meeting are being streamed live on the internet at www.philasd.org/live and can be seen on PSTV's Comcast Channel 52 and Verizon Fios Channel 20. The proceedings are also being recorded by the School District of Philadelphia. The school district's recordings are protected by the copyright laws of the United States and may not be used in any manner without the express written consent of the school district. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vice President Walker. Next, I'd like to ask Board Member Lee Wong to make a special announcement about ways that our viewing audience can participate in tonight's remote meeting.
Thank you, President Wilkerson, and I regret that I can't be with you there in person. I also regret that we're not hearing a student performance at the commencement of this meeting. So we'll all look forward to when we do that again. In this unprecedented time, it was clear that the Board of Education had to meet to ensure that the critical work of the district educating Philadelphia students can continue as nimbly, innovatively, and quickly as possible. That is what we are all here to do. But as a board, we have struggled with how best to do this while at the same time allowing for as much access as possible to this meeting for our Philadelphia community. This is particularly important tonight because we are looking not just for the public question, but for your suggestions as well to make our work stronger. For these reasons, we hope you will join us tonight in a new effort we are trying. If you have questions or suggestions for us about information that is presented this evening, please share them either by tweeting at PHL School Board and using the hashtag board comment, or you can email us at schoolboard@philasd.org using the subject line board comment. We have 2 staff members monitoring these channels and collecting your input in real time. Our staff will be monitoring this Twitter thread and email through the district presentation portion of tonight's meeting. We will make an announcement when this period comes to a close. At the end of tonight's public comment portion of the agenda, board members will review any input we receive through these channels. We will do our best to summarize what we see and may choose to ask questions or share suggestions. Again, this is not meant to replace the public comment process, which we have advertised and will proceed with tonight. but we hope it is a way for us to be a little more connected to those watching us this evening. We will learn from what we do tonight and hope to use what we've learned in future meetings. Let me repeat these one more time. If you have questions or suggestions for us about information that is presented this evening, please share them either by tweeting at THL School Board and using the hashtag board comments, or you can email us at schoolboard@philasd.org with the subject line board comment. Thank you for your attention and participation.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Before we continue with tonight's roll call, I'd like to make a few comments. First, as I've shared in the run-up to this meeting, this is unprecedented territory for us as a governing board. As a board, we're here first and foremost to ensure that the critical work of the school district, educating Philadelphia's children, can be accomplished, while we comply with stringent health and safety measures instituted by Governor Wolf and Mayor Kinney. We also believe deeply in our responsibility to be transparent and accessible to many communities who depend on us and support the School District of Philadelphia. Understanding that we could not operate our normal meeting format tonight, we've tried our hardest to provide the maximum transparency and feasibility possible at this time, in compliance with federal, state, and local emergency and public health directives. We have less than 10 individuals here in the auditorium, and our other board members, General Counsel, and our CFO, who will be making a presentation tonight, are participating by phone. As Vice President Walker shared, this meeting is being live streamed and broadcast and is being recorded. And as Lee Wong shared, we're looking forward to including you through our social media and email. Additionally, we have spent the last week collecting testimony in both written and telephonic recorded formats. We will be reading the submissions we received before the meeting into the record tonight. On behalf of the board, I want to thank the many people who've given us input into ways to make this meeting as transparent and accessible as possible. This is certainly a work in progress, and we thank all of you for your understanding and patience as we continue to learn how to make this type of remote platform work for as many of our constituents as possible. Thank you. And there's one more large thank you I'd like to make before we begin, and that's to our entire Philadelphia education community. Educators, school staff, district staff, city partners, and of course our parents and families for the work and support that you have given the Philadelphia community over the last 2 weeks. On behalf of the board, I want to express our pride in the work that has happened on every level of our community. Finally, I'd like to bring to your attention emergency action item 54 and 55 on tonight's agenda. Item 54 is a contract with CDI Technologies for the acquisition of 50,000 Chromebook computers for schools and students to address district-wide gaps in home access to computing devices created by COVID-19 school closures. Action item 55 is a resolution authorizing the superintendent of the school district to take necessary action in furtherance of school district operations in the best interests of children during, as part of, and necessitated by the school district, city, state, and federal COVID-19 response efforts and declaration of emergency. The Board of Education exists in order to ensure our students are learning and achieving. Action item 55 is a critical measure for the board to take at this time. It will authorize Dr. Height to take action quickly and nimbly, which are expressly needed to facilitate the COVID-19 response efforts. The item includes clear guardrails such as monitoring measures and financial limits that will be crucial for our district to better serve our families by providing the ability to quickly act on important and rapidly changing things, such as the ability to remediate asbestos and deploy new technologies. The text of these action items was finalized within the last 24 hours, and they were posted on the board's website this afternoon. The necessity of board action on these items tonight invokes the emergency provisions of the Sunshine Act, as these items require immediate board action. These items deal directly with the issues the district is facing regarding COVID-19 pandemic and our ability to protect the safety and the needs of our students and staff. We'll now begin tonight's business meeting with a roll call. Ms. Rout, please make an announcement about the board's executive session and then call the roll.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sorry. I would like to announce that the Board of Education met in executive session on March 5th to discuss confidential and privileged and quasi-judicial charter school matters, and earlier today to discuss quasi-judicial proceedings and privileged and confidential matters. Now for the roll call. Ms. Danzy?
Present.
Ms. Ahaya Hinton?
Present.
And I'm going to announce Ms. Dancy is present at 4:40. Ms. Ahaya Hinton is participating by phone. And Ms. Fix Lopez?
Present by phone.
Thank you. Mr. Huang?
Also present by phone.
Thank you. Dr. McColgan?
Present by phone.
Thank you. Dr. McGinley?
Present.
Thank you. Dr. McGinley is present at 4:40. Dr. McIver?
Present by phone.
Thank you. Vice President Walker?
Present by phone.
Thank you. President Wilkerson?
I'm present at 4:40.
Thank you. Superintendent Height?
Present at 4:40.
Thank you. Ms. Ibrahim?
Present by phone.
Thank you. And Mr. Williams?
Present by phone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rout. Board members, before we proceed, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 27th action meeting?
So moved.
Is there a
So
second?
moved.
I need a second.
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 Thank you. Board members, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Thank you. The minutes are adopted. Thank you. It's now time for our superintendent, Dr. Height, to give opening remarks.
Good afternoon, and thank you, President Wilkerson, and thank you to all the board members who are joining in person and by phone. I know that these are extraordinary circumstances and that most of us are practicing social distancing in light of COVID-19 or the coronavirus. I want to start out by also thanking all those who are joining us virtually right now. We understand the importance of making this meeting available to the public and are thankful for those who are tuning in and who have submitted testimony. We hope that this crisis ends soon and we can all be together again, but until then, I want to thank everyone for their understanding and flexibility. Before I discuss how the School District of Philadelphia is supporting students, families, and staff during our closures related to the spread of COVID-19, I do want to note that tonight, the district will present its lump sum budget for fiscal year 2020-2021 to the Board of Education. In a few minutes, Ori Monson, the district's chief financial officer, will walk everyone through the presentation that outlines our lump sum statement and 5-year plan. The plan will build on prior investments and support new priorities to further improve academic outcomes for students. Now, Madam President, I want to shift the focus over toward what the district has been doing to help ensure students, families, and staff are supported while schools are closed. So we're going to go to the presentation, and may we advance to the next slide, please. So over the past few weeks, I have been inspired by the heroic efforts of our staff. The team members from numerous departments across the district have rallied to support our emergency response efforts. This is a thank you slide. If we could advance, please. I want to thank our food service workers and school safety officers, and I want to talk about them more later in this presentation. Our facilities and operations teams have also worked tirelessly, deploying roving cleaners and implementing more rigorous standards and supporting healthy schools and office environments. Our principals, our teachers, our assistant superintendents, all of our school-based staff have encouraged students to follow good hygiene practices to keep themselves and others safe, and cared for and comforted them as they received news about the closure and supported remote learning efforts and meal distribution. The Academic Supports Office, who worked diligently to create instructional packets for every grade level to support equitable access to learning opportunities for students, and our IT department, who has worked hard to ensure key district operations like payroll can be supported remotely. Next slide. Our dedicated principals and teachers and school support staff are continuing to support students in a variety of ways by communicating via email, phone, or other platforms to answer questions and support learning, enabling access to district-purchased online learning programs, scheduling virtual office hours or times for individuals or groups of students to meet with their teachers, and suggesting other resources for students to use to support learning. A great example of this ongoing work is Keziah Ridgway, who teaches 10th grade at Northeast High School. Keziah was recently featured on CBS National News, sharing her dedication to her students and making house calls to ensure that her students knew she was there to support them. I want to thank all of our amazing school-based colleagues for the work that they are currently doing and will continue to do on behalf of our students. Next slide. To ensure that students can still have nutritious meals while all schools are closed, the School District of Philadelphia, several charter schools, and the Philadelphia Housing Authority are coordinating with the city's Office of Children and Families to provide grab-and-go meals for children and youth throughout the city. The sites were selected in consultation with the City of Philadelphia's Office of Emergency Management, OEM, based on neighborhood needs, availability of refrigeration, and a desire to be geographically spread throughout the city. Beginning Monday, March 23rd, families could pick up meals at 80 locations. For full lists of grab-and-go meal locations, please visit philasd.org/coronavirus. Meals are available twice per week on Mondays and Thursdays only, from 9 a.m. to noon. On each day, individuals can pick up three breakfast meals and 3 lunch meals for every child in the household. All children and youth are eligible. There are no ID requirements. As of this afternoon, we have distributed over 200,000 meals. I want to thank our food service workers and our school safety officers, as well as many of the partners at the city, for ensuring that students have nutritional meals while schools are closed. Next slide. The School District of Philadelphia also encourages parents and caregivers to find ways to keep their children engaged in educational activities during this extended period of school closures. The district is making learning guides available as a resource during this time. These optional learning guides, K-12, are offered for personal use. The learning guides are aligned to areas previously taught to students during the school year, and parents and students may select which learning guides to use. Paper copies of English language arts and mathematics learning guides are available at all school district grab-and-go meal distribution sites. Electronic copies can be accessed online. They include daily lessons that will engage students for 10 days. The school district made a new set of learning guides available online yesterday, and the paper-based learning guides will be available at grab-and-go meal sites on Monday. To date, 150,000 paper-based learning guides have been distributed to students. The learning guides are designed to assist parents. The new learning guides are designed to assist parents and engage students with independent learning activities to reinforce learned skills and content. The new Phase 2 learning guides are also accompanied by strategy guides for English language learners, specifically students who are considered newcomers, and students with IEPs. The ESOL resources were developed to provide opportunities for students learning English to practice language skills while they are at home. English language learners are encouraged to engage in the activities included in the guides. And I will add here that we are manning 10 now hotlines, and those hotlines are in various languages. And if students require additional help, they can call in to the hotline, ask for that help, and then we will have an ESOL teacher respond back to that household to work with that young person. In addition, the purpose of the special education strategy guides are to support parents and students who may not have access to the learning guides. And those families there are also supplemental resources for children, several categories of children with special needs. We're also asking that if parents are concerned with how to use those supplemental resources, we also encourage you to call into the hotline, and then we would have a special education staff member respond that will be able to assist you in how to utilize the supplemental resources. Families are encouraged to finish the lessons from the first set of guides this week and start lessons in the next set of guides on Monday, March 30th. Paper copies of the next set of ELA and math learning guides will be available at district grab-and-go meal sites on Monday. I want to thank families for encouraging the use of these guides with your children while the district is closed and for your ongoing support. I also want to thank all of our staff members who have been working around the clock to produce and distribute these important learning guides. Next slide. As I communicated earlier, we have hotlines here at the School District of Philadelphia that are available now in 10 languages to answer questions on the learning guides, as well as to help individuals with the supplemental resources associated with those guides. If it's an ELL, a child who is an English language learner, or a child with an IEP. The hotlines will operate Monday through Thursday from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m., although calls back to support families can occur after those times. You can now also email your questions to covid19info@philasd.org. We have launched an FAQ, frequently asked questions section, on the website for families and employees. The family FAQs are on the public access site, and for employees on a staff access only, to make it easy for both to access answers to key questions as they are available. Lastly, yesterday, I began what will be a weekly Facebook Live event where I will share the latest updates on our plans while schools are closed and respond to key questions we received in advance through the hotline and email platforms. While we'll not be able to immediately respond to questions submitted during the live event, those questions will be addressed during the next live event and through our online FAQs. Viewings of yesterday's Facebook Live event is at 20,000 and counting. Next slide. We are committed to updating staff and families with timely and accurate information frequently, as is best practice during a crisis. Families are updated regularly, almost daily at this point, via letters, robocalls, and text messages in the most prevalent languages spoken by our families. The website is updated daily, and there are continuous efforts to drive audience to this site for the latest information. A red alert banner with user-friendly links to the most critical information is featured on the district's homepage and the homepages for every school's website. The sliders, rotating picks on the district's homepage are exclusively focused on providing easy access to the most pertinent information families and staff need to know at any given time. I'm also sending regular messages to ensure that all employees are kept up to date and feel connected during this time. And the latest information is always available on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram social media platforms, so we encourage everyone to follow. In addition, we plan to announce next week the earliest date that the School District of Philadelphia will be able to safely return to schools. We know that there have been many questions about this, and we want to get this out to our community, to our staff members, to our students, and to our families as soon as possible. So stay tuned for that announcement that will be coming early next week. We hope to make an announcement regarding the earliest date we will be able to return to school, understanding that this current set of circumstances could very easily be extended. We also have received a lot of questions regarding credit, graduation, and making sure that our young people have what they need around the grading periods. We will also be sending out more detailed information about those topics as well next week. Next slide, please. I'd like to share some information about plans to support remote learning while schools are closed and an action item that has been added to tonight's agenda for consideration by the board. But before I do, I want to comment on remote learning more broadly. It is really important to consistently communicate that we want our teachers and principals to stay connected with their students during this time. We want them to connect with students and families about the learning guides and post additional resources that may be helpful. We want them to check in and be accessible by phone, email, and other platforms like Class Dojo. These are incredibly important actions that teachers are taking to support our students on a daily basis, and once again, we thank you for taking those actions. To support the district's efforts to offer continuity of learning for all students during this unprecedented time, we have been working on a plan to provide all students with access to digital learning opportunities in the event that our schools remain closed for longer periods of time. The plan provides a Chromebook to every district student who needs one for learning at home and makes digital content available to retain and learn skills with the support of a teacher. Tonight, the board will consider an action item approving up to $11 million for the purchase of up to 50,000 new Chromebooks. The district will determine the exact number of new devices to purchase once the central office works with each school to determine how many Chromebooks are currently available in schools for distribution and how many of their students will need one. We're working with the Fund for the School District of Philadelphia to secure private support to help offset some of the costs of this digital learning plan. The school district is also working with the City of Philadelphia to create a comprehensive list of low-cost internet options or access to free Wi-Fi mobile hotspots across the city. The list will be available on the district's website and the City of Philadelphia's website the week of April 6. During that time, we will notify families of their scheduled Chromebook pickup date and time in multiple ways, such as phone calls and text messages. Beginning the week of April 13th, Chromebooks will be distributed to students and families at schools using strict social distancing practices and other safety protocols. Support for safe Chromebook distribution will be supported by the school district staff, the City of Philadelphia, and our Office of School Safety. During this time, teachers will also begin using digital learning tools to provide optional virtual instruction for students. This content should reinforce skills, provide enrichment opportunities, and integrate new content as appropriate. Teachers can also continue to use their own activities to engage their students. Students and families will also have access to optional online tutorials for Google Classroom and other Google tools. This is new for us all. And there is still much work to do to finalize and implement this plan. This is a large-scale effort, and we need to be flexible while we act with urgency so that our students and families can get the technology access they deserve and the learning opportunities they deserve. We're all committed to ensuring that our students can continue learning in this unprecedented time while we work to keep everyone safe and healthy. At this time, Madam President, I'd also like to give a couple of updates on some of the capital work that's happening.
Thank you. Please.
All capital projects were halted on March 13th, except for Silas Cohen, Ryan Avenue, and the SLAMS project at Drexel, which continued until the governor's order on March 18th, when all work was suspended. We're working on various strategies to restart key projects based on the amount of time the closure may last, the availability and safety of district project supervisory staff, and also the ability to assure that contractors will enforce all necessary health-related job safety measures. All asbestos and lead safe projects were placed on hold March 13th, Based on guidance from the city, we are currently restarting a limited group of asbestos abatement projects and the lead safe projects. For the asbestos projects, we're finalizing communications to staff and families, as well as coordinating, scheduling, inspection, and testing procedures with the PFT. Lead safe projects have restarted at 7 schools. Environmental inspectors are on site for the lead safe projects, and contractors will be monitored for social distancing and other job site health protection measures. Our facility area coordinators are checking on conditions in schools within their networks, and call-in staff or maintenance assistants as needed, and our grab-and-go meal sites are being staffed daily by a building engineer. In order to be ready for potential opening dates, we are developing and evaluating a new cleaning scope and schedule, as well as discussing alternative cleaning methods and products with other large urban districts and seeking the advice of private environmental firms. The asbestos projects are slated to restart at McClure, specifically in the gymnasium, at Richmond, 4 classrooms, Nebinger, damaged pipe in the basement. Lead projects slated to start or have started at Pennypacker, McClure, Hopkinson, Shepherd, Olney, Lowell, and Morrison. I'd now like to transition I'd now like to transition, Madam President, to our Chief Financial Officer, Ori Munson, who will present the lump sum statement. And before he presents the lump sum statement, there is one additional slide that provides for financial updates. And I just want to also just share that information that the finance team is working and continues to work diligently to ensure ongoing operations and long-term fiscal health during the closure, including ensuring that payroll functions accurately and timely, redesigning purchasing and vendor payment guidelines to ensure the ability to meet emergent needs while also maintaining sound internal fiscal controls, monitoring changes in revenue projections with the city and state, ensuring that all debt service payments of the district are made as required, and completing the school budget planning process for FY21 with each individual school.
I'm sorry. Before you turn over to Mr. Munson, I'd like to give the board members
Sure.
an opportunity to ask questions you might have. They might have of you.
Great. Yeah, so I'm at the point to turn it over to Mr. Munson to present the lump sum statement. So if there are questions from the board members, we should.
Yeah, I'd like to ask questions, questions they might have of you.
Sure.
Get that out of the way before we proceed to Mr. Munson. Board members and student board reps, I'm now going to ask if there are any questions or comments for Dr. Height. In order to adapt to our remote platform, I'm going to call on board member and student representatives' names in small groups and ask that if you have questions, you ask them at that time so that we can keep track of who's posing a question and follow your voices. Ms. Danzy, Ms. Hinton, and Ms. Fix-Lopez, do you have any comments or questions for Dr. Height? And identify yourself, please.
Julia Danzig. Just one. Dr. Height, I know everything is in a state of flux. Are you working with the governor and everything, trying so we can kind of get a picture of where we are in terms of how long this may be or what we're going to do?
Yes, we are. We're not only working with Harrisburg, but we're also working very closely with the city of Philadelphia as well, because what is likely done for one sector will impact greatly the other sector. But we have been in constant communication with the governor's office about their plans on whether or not they're going to make an announcement that extends the school year longer. And as I indicated earlier, next week we plan to also announce the earliest date by which we think that we will be able to return here in the school district.
The Hinton or Ms. Fix-Lopez, do you have any questions for Dr. Height?
This is Ms. Fix-Lopez. I do have one question regarding the multilingual hotlines. My understanding from what you just said is that if individuals have questions with the ESL components or special ed or really anything related to these learning guides that they're encouraged to call into these lines. But we have received some testimony, both written and on Twitter, that is saying that there have been parents that have called into these lines and asked special ed questions, but that those on the lines are not necessarily trained to answer those questions. So my question to you is, who are the people answering those phones? How are they trained, and how are they managing questions that they're getting that they may not be able to answer?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. That's a really important question. So the individuals who are manning the phone are from the Family and Community Engagement Office, and they are the intent, if they cannot answer a question, and that's why I indicated earlier that then they will then take that, if that question is one that deals with special education, that question will then go to a special education staff member who will then return the call of that parent to provide additional assistance. The same holds true with the English language learners, particularly the students who would be considered newcomers, that the individuals on the hotline calls are not necessarily answering those questions. They're directing those questions to individuals who would then call the parents back.
Okay, thank you.
This is Mr. Hare Hitton. Just a quick question. I know that there's been some concern expressed regarding some of the quality of the robocalls. If parents get a robocall or it's a consistent pattern, who should they contact about addressing that?
Yeah, there are multiple ways to do that. One is that any parent could call the hotline and say, I'm having trouble understanding the robocall. We understand that there were some technical difficulties with one of the several of the robocalls yesterday and the day before. Those have been fixed, and we hope that it will eliminate that issue. However, there's also now a web address that individuals could use, not a web address, an email address that individuals could send those questions to. And I'll have that address for you momentarily. It's not right in front of me, but it is an email address as well that individuals could use. But I would recommend a call to the hotline if they're getting the wrong robocalls, so that we could direct or at least investigate what's happening with the robocall, the functioning of that service.
Thank you.
We'll now take questions from Mr. Huang, Dr. McCulkin, and Dr. McGinley, if you have any.
This is Dr. Morgan. I applaud the efforts, and happy that all of our kids are going to be getting Chromebooks. But if that's not going to start until at least April 13th, by the time we get them and do whatever we need to do to, get them ready to distribute, what is, and I know you may not have all these answers, but what is going to be the instruction to teachers as well as other support staff, such as counselors, nurses, behavioral therapists, et cetera, in regard to what they can or should be doing in these next couple of weeks, because I'd hate to lose that opportunity and want to give teachers the opportunity to, be teaching their kids, even if by, reaching out by telephone.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Dr. McColgan. And before I go to your question, I want to provide that email address that I just talked about, and that is COVID-19 info, COVID, COVID 19 info @philasd.org. And so individuals could use that email address and communicate about the robocalls if they are faulty or not functioning. Back to your question, Dr. McColgan. Yes, Monday, then the new package go out Monday. It would, ideally, they will be for the next 10 days. After that, we would have begun a process to provide both training for staff members along with clear protocols for the expectations for everyone in schools, not just teachers, but administrators, guidance counselors, nurses, and provide some clarity around what we will be requesting those individuals to do leading up to the distribution of the Chromebook. So we are working with the labor partners to actually work through those requests and what those things are that we're going to be asking everyone to do, and everyone will have a specific expectation around supporting a student. But we are in the process of working through what those requests will be, because we have to work that with the unions that represent all of those staff members.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the date of that expectation, but in the meantime, is there going to be clarity in regard if teachers have things they want to be doing? Because I've heard from some teachers that said that they feel like they were told they can't be doing what they were doing in regard to reaching out to teachers, and we'd like some clarity if there's a teacher who wants to reach out to students. Is that okay?
Yeah, so we've been providing that, and we sent out some revised guidance, and we are actually encouraging all teachers, not just teachers, but all staff members to be reaching out to students, making themselves available to students. We have a draft of the guidance for what we will want our teachers to do, and we've actually shared that with the PFT and CASA, but we hope to send that out early next week. And so that should be going out early next week as we finalize that draft document for the individuals who represent principals and all educators.
Are there any other questions? Let me turn to the next group.
wait.
I'm sorry, Dr. McGee.
That's okay. I'm here, so you forget I'm here.
I know, out of sight, inside, out of
I
mind.
just wanted to ask Dr. Heide about the asbestos abatement. You indicated a number of schools where the work will continue, but right now it's still, we haven't gotten the okay from the city for that work to continue. Is that where we are?
No, we have received the okay for the work to
Okay.
restart
Okay.
on that. We have started the lead work,
Okay.
and the asbestos work will begin. But naturally, we are using groups that had to get all of their materials
Okay.
together. So those are slated to start, but they require a set of communication protocols to the faculties, to the staff, and to the PFT.
Okay. And if they weren't doing this now, that would have to happen at some other time, like the summer or
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Our next questions will come from Dr. McIver, Vice President Wayne Walker, and our student representative, Ibrahim. Do you have any questions or comments for Dr. Height?
This is Angela McIver, and I do have questions, Dr. Height. There are a lot of parents and students that are concerned about all of the unknowns, and I started taking a list of them, and I just wanted to get a sense from you of when you think these questions can be answered. So here are a few. Community service hours for students who are required to have those in high school. Graduation for our high school seniors, AP and IB examinations, and then 3rd and 7th grade PSSA testing, which has been used for admissions to Masterman and special admit schools, prom and spring athletics. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, you're right. I mean, all of those things, unfortunately, are on hold at the moment, and we will be putting out information. We hope to be putting out information early next week about graduations. Some of the other things that you mentioned are much harder to do, like you talked about AP testing. IB canceled their tests, but AP asked young people to go online and do those assessments. We will actually make a request on behalf of students once we are able to get all of the technology that they will reopen a window for our young people once many of our students who may not have the technology now, once they get the technology, we'll make a request to College Board to reopen that. But with respect to prom and graduations and those types of things, those are things that could likely be impacted by the orders from the city and the orders from the governor. And we naturally want our young people to experience those events. And if there's a way to delay those events or do those events at a later time, we certainly want to do that. But we cannot give any more information about that now simply because of the set of circumstances we are in. We will give information about graduation and the requirements that students will need to meet, as well as credit recovery for any students who are on the borderline and may be at risk of graduating. We want to make sure they have the ability to recover their credits. But all of those other things are unknowns, and until we know more about how long we will be out or that many of these event spaces will remain closed, it's hard for us to give any type of information on that until we're back to some degree of normalcy. I will say we will approach it, at least the graduations, like many of the colleges and universities. We want our children to experience graduation, but we may have to do that at a later date. And so that our young people will then have that experience. That may be the same with proms, but we're going to do our best to ensure that our children have those experiences. And we just have to work through a set of challenging circumstances because there are lots of unknowns because we don't control all of those sites or those places.
Thank you, Dr. Height.
I actually had just a quick follow-up, and it has to do with the IB testing. And I know the International IB Organization has canceled all testing, but I think the messaging that is going out is that it's done. Like, there's no more schooling because the international organization is no longer testing. And I would encourage the curriculum officer, whoever is making decisions, to think about ways that we can assess students. We can assess students without having to do the actual test. And I just worry that if that is canceled and say there's no more IB testing, then IB teaching ends, and it shouldn't.
Yeah, no, the IB instruction does not need to end simply because there's no test coming from IBO. Students could still work on those skills, which would be very beneficial to those young people as they go off or think about going off to college or beyond high school.
Dr. McGinley?
Just a point of information. The College Board right now plans to offer AP exams in an online format, a shorter exam than they have done in the past.
Like 45 minutes.
Yeah, so I'm sure parents who are concerned about that could go to the College Board for information.
But we'll also be providing additional information to families.
We'll provide additional information, and so many of our young people don't have access to the technology, and that creates a problem. And so once we get the technology out, we want to make that available and those dates and that information available.
And that'll be on our frequently asked questions
Absolutely.
format as well. Thank you. Are there any other questions from board members or our student reps? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Height. We'll now have one presentation this evening, the lump sum statement action item from Ori Munson, our Chief Financial Officer for the school district. We're moving forward with this presentation tonight to track timelines in the Home Rule Charter. Adoption of the lump sum statement is our first step in adopting next year's budget. And so at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Munson, who's joining us via the telephone, to make his presentation.
Thank you, President Wilkerson. Good evening, board members. Before you, I'm going to present the lump sum statement for fiscal year 2021 next year, as well as in the context of our 5-year plan. Moving ahead to the next slide. To put this presentation in context, the lump sum budget was built based on city and state budget proposals, which predated the coronavirus issues, which are obviously impacting all aspects of district operations and finances. The presentation is a little shorter than our usual one, so we can focus on the lump sum budget, which was designed to build on the district's continued progress in the context of a fiscal outlook, which is much different from the unknowns being faced across the globe at this time. As we continue our current year responses to the unprecedented challenges of the pandemic, and we continue our ongoing dialogue with the city and state about next year's funding, we will continue to update the public through our budget hearings and future budget revisions throughout the remainder of the budget process. Next slide, please. Since 2016, we've been making strategic investments to strengthen our schools, supporting academic achievement and progress, new core materials, grade-level libraries, and significant classroom modernizations, improving school climate and culture, improved attendance strategies, new alternatives to suspensions, stronger engagement with city partners, positive behavior interventions and support, and a focus on college and career readiness with more AP and dual enrollment courses, 19 college and career readiness coordinators, new offices of post-secondary readiness, and high school support. Next slide, please. For 4 years in a row, the public schools across the city have improved 11 points, and that's district-led and charter schools across the city. Next slide, please. We've also made significant investments to support cleaner and healthier schools. Since 2014, we've spent over $20 million to complete environmental and asbestos-related projects, almost 2,000 projects in the last 18 months alone, fully stabilized lead paint in 32 elementary schools, certified another 13 as lead safe, and plan to certify another 26 by the end of the year. We've added multiple state-of-the-art hydration stations in every school, 112 new cleaning positions, installed 150 new air conditioning units at 9 schools, and humidity sensors to monitor and proactively prevent mold in 31 targeted schools. Next slide, please. We've been making all this progress while maintaining a strong fiscal foundation. This district earned from Moody's an investment-grade rating. That's the first investment-grade credit rating since 1977. We project to end this year with a positive year-end fund balance for the 6th year in a row. And for 6 consecutive years, we've had no negative audit findings in our reviews of the district. Next slide, please. The 2021 investment plan will build on prior investments and support new priorities to further improve the academic outcomes for students. Next slide, please. The lump sum as presented includes new instructional supports, including 30 additional English language teachers, rewriting our curriculum to reflect the latest insights on how students learn, be more culturally inclusive and relevant, increased professional development, summer institutes, and August professional development. Additional supports for school leaders and educators, including in-house programs for aspiring school leaders, and additional supports for student-teacher placement. Next slide, please. Also including additional student and climate supports, with positive behavior intervention and support coaches, additional attendance coaches supporting targeted schools, professional development for school climate professionals, increased social emotional learning programs, additional nurses for alternative education and educational options programs, and case managers to support students who are transitioning back to school. The facility is additional funding for cleaning and maintenance to make all schools healthy spaces for students and staff. Next slide, please. So our financial outlook, and I will preface again by saying that our financial outlook was, this is what we looked like about a month ago, or a few weeks ago. We'll discuss in more detail kind of where we are today. Next slide, please. The proposed 2021 lump sum budget includes projected revenues of about $3.4 billion and total expenditures of around $3.4 billion. Is a relatively structurally balanced budget. And we currently project to end the current year with a positive fund balance of $153 million, and we project to end next year a positive fund balance of $165 million. Next slide, please. The 5-year plan focuses on maintaining fiscal stability. We use reasonable projections and assumptions for revenues and expenditures. These are based on actual revenues and expenditures, current law, historical spending and enrollment trends, and most recent city, state, and federal budget proposals. And again, those proposals were all made in February and very early March before this, the pandemic. The primary objectives of the plan are to identify sufficient revenues to meet the anticipated obligations for the first 24 months, 2 years of the plan, and establish baseline financial projections to enable dialogue among all the school district funders. Next slide, please. So our preliminary 5-year plan, with proposed the charter funding changes, which I have spoken about at previous committee meetings that were proposed by the governor, particularly involving special ed calculations. If everything proposed in the governor's plan and with the city original proposed budget, the district would actually have achieved a fairly structurally balanced budget, where our revenue growth and our expenditure growth, revenue growth at 2%, expenditure growth at 1.8%, are in balance. And under this plan, we would actually have structural balance for all 5 years of the plan. Next slide, please. We obviously have, every plan comes with risk. I will say that up until about a month ago, economic downturn was a little lower on the list. But obviously, the current economic uncertainty resulting from the pandemic threatens all of our revenue assumptions and the revenue assumptions for our funders, the city and the state. Obviously, if the governor's proposed revenues are not in the final state budget, or the proposed charter formula changes are not included in the final state budget, would dramatically impact our projections. Just the non-approved, if the charter formula is not approved, we would actually have a negative fund balance beginning in fiscal year 22, escalating to a negative, more than negative $400 million by fiscal year 25. Obviously, if the mayor's proposed revenues are not included in the final city budget, if there are additional facilities needs, and we have obviously seen what's happened the past year, and even though we have, we are planning to set aside a facilities reserve of $25 million going into next year. There is a proposal for new state grant funding, and if that does not come through, that can also impact the plan. If there are any delays in the state budget process, additional increases in the PSERS retirement system contribution schedule, particularly in light of the stock market turmoil, which can dramatically impact that. As you may recall, we now contribute about 35% of salaries to PSERS, up from 5% in 2011. And these assumptions did not include any costs associated with new labor contracts. Our two largest contracts expire at the end of this coming summer. Next slide, please. Just to lay out the timeline, so tonight, putting before you the proposed lump sum budget for vote, which then has to be sent to the mayor and city council per the charter. There hopefully will be a Finance and Facilities Committee meeting on April 16th. There's a Board of Education budget hearing scheduled for the 23rd. The current schedule for city councils for the school district to have its budget hearing on May 12th. Another Finance and Facilities Committee meeting on May 14th. And the Board of Education budget vote is currently slated for May 28th. May is usually when the city adopts its tax measures, and June would hopefully be the state budget adoption. This is the current timeline, and obviously we're all watching to see how the pandemic and the restrictions and requirements for health and human safety are going to impact that calendar. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
On board members by groups, in case you have any questions. Ms. Danzy, Ms. Hinton, and Ms. Fix-Lopez, any questions for Mr. Munson?
Not really, except for the fact that if I'm clear, this budget doesn't include any of the extras we are now having to expend and projections that we don't know what will be as a result of the health crisis.
So the one area we do have in here is we had already taken down our projected revenues from liquor by the drink for the current year. So liquor by the drink is primarily from bars and restaurants, which obviously are not open. We took down those. We're a little behind. Collections are always about 6 weeks behind, so we took out about 2 months worth of collections, about $11 million from current year projections. but we have not yet updated any of the projections for next year and beyond. And those are, very much in flux right now.
This is Mr. Hare-Hinton, and you may have answered it, but in terms of being able to plan moving forward, when will we really know what the impact will be of the financial resources that we thought we had that we may not have?
So there are a couple of pieces to look at. From the direct tax revenue side, the single largest tax we get is local property taxes. It makes up about 29% of our revenues. We are in discussions with the city. We'll wait for the city to do its analysis of what the numbers are likely to be. Traditionally, when you look at recessions, property taxes take a while to see the impact. So I don't know if we'd see that except in the commercial sector, which is obviously a portion and tends to react a little bit more quickly, which will also affect our use and occupancy tax revenues. I think obviously the parking authority is impacted. We get money from that, casinos, those types of areas. And then what the city is able to do in terms of the city grant will obviously be a result of what the city is facing, doing its own assessment of the recessionary impacts. And the city will face greater challenges because of likely impacts on the wage tax and sales tax more than any other. The state is obviously going to face great challenges as well, both from it's heavily reliant on the sales tax and on personal income tax as well as corporate taxes. And as they look at additional expenditures that they're incurring currently, and obviously there was all the news about the large jump in unemployment numbers, for example, as the state looks at balancing its budget, can have a significant impact on what they're able to pledge to us in revenues. It was helpful that when they passed, they guaranteed the revenues that had already been promised for the rest of this fiscal year. But for next year, we're in contact with the state and trying to follow. Within the next few weeks, I believe the Independent Fiscal Office of the state is supposed to put out its revised projections, which will help guide a lot of the state's budget discussions. And we'll be watching that closely. And then to the positive side, obviously the stimulus bills that were passed federally last night or earlier this morning, we kind of know the broad brush strokes of that, but it appears though obviously could be some significant support coming from that. It'll take a little while for those details to flesh out of exactly how those funds will come to us and how they'll be able to support us. So there are a lot of pieces up in the air right now and a lot that's going to happen over the next month that will help us get greater direction. I expect what we present to you in May, and obviously we'll keep you and the public and everyone informed through that process, will look very different from what's before you right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Fix Lopez, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, thanks.
Some of our community are sending their children to charter schools. Could you talk a little bit about how this is likely to impact charter schools?
So in the short term, we are continuing to pay charter schools so they will have the resources. The bill passed by the state froze all of the current enrollments as of March 13th, so there won't be a lot of up and down there. We have made all of our payments, and we will continue to make all of our payments throughout the rest of the year. Probably in June, once we get direction from the state, there'll have to be some kind of reconciliation. But there's no, the funding is continuing, and they'll be able to support students and looking at different ways, much in the same ways we're looking at supporting the district students. And also froze the cyber schools at their enrollments as of March 13th, and they're continuing to be funded at those same levels as well.
Our next group of board members are Mr. Wong, Dr. McGulkin, and Dr. McGinley. Do you have any questions for Mr. Munson?
I don't have any questions at this time. I'm more concerned about next year's budget at the moment.
It's like a nightmare. I know. Liquor by the drink ought to rebound in a strong way when this is all over. Let's see, Dr. McCulkin or Mr. Wong, do you have any questions?
No, agree with Dr. McGinley.
And then Dr. McIver, Vice President Walker, and our student reps, do you have any questions for Mr. Munson?
This is Angela McIver. No questions.
This is Wayne Walker. Not a question, but an emphasis. Finance and Facilities Committee co-chair Harry Hinton hit right on the point that's on my mind: what ifs and what ifs and what ifs. So I appreciate the fact that Mr. Munson's already thinking about what ifs, and look forward to hearing more about that when we have a Finance and Facilities Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Want to thank you.
I'm sorry. This
I'm
is Board
sorry.
Member Huang. I was hoping to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to skip you. Your turn.
No worries. We recently did a fairly significant borrowing, and it was understood.
Can you
that
speak a
there was
little louder, please?
Sure. We recently did a significant borrowing, and it was understood that there was a time horizon for that borrowing in order to warrant the tax-exempt status and whatnot. Have we gotten any guidance on whether there is some flexibility on that, given that there may be some extended freeze in projects like that of no fault of our own?
I think that it's a little too early to talk about that, in part because we're 5 months into a 3-year time frame where we'd have to have committed 85% of the funds. It is something we're already talking about and thinking about. I will say it's clearly not anything the district did. It's a national, global issue. So I would expect it to be a little more understanding. I will also point out that the reason the push is there to ensure the money is being used and used quickly is so that people aren't borrowing money just to try and earn interest, arbitrage. And clearly in the current environment, no one is trying to earn interest. So I think we'll have pretty good case if we get to that point, but I'm hopeful that with the efforts we've put in and the capacity increases we've made, that we will, even with this, even with these delays and issues, that we will actually be able to ramp up and spend the money and meet those guidelines regardless. But your point is taken, and obviously one that we will be fully aware of.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Munson? Want to thank you and you, Dr. Height, and the entire team for all the work that you're doing. These are challenging times, and I know that you're moving on a lot of different planes simultaneously. It's, the conversations that used to be easy phone conversations are not easy phone conversations anymore. Everything is taking more time and more stressful than it ordinarily is. It's stressful for our families, our students, for, everybody at the staff. In the schools, people want to do more. They want to nail down things so that there can be some predictability to life, and we're just not in those times. Before moving on, I know that board members had wanted to express, what they've been thinking about. Our board members have, spent a lot of time and worry a lot about what's going on in our schools, even in the best of times. And these certainly aren't the best of times. And so I'm going to, in reverse order, run through the list of board members. And now would be the time if you want to make some kind of statement or share your concerns. And I'll start with Dr. McGinley.
Thank you. I would. I certainly just want to note how deeply I regret that we find ourselves in this circumstance. And I know that many parents are also worried about what the future holds. And the only assurance I can give to parents at this time is that I've spoken to educators from other parts of the country who, because of hurricanes or because of flooding or other, natural disasters, saw their children lose months of school. And to a person, these educators feel that that things balanced out, that things got caught up, and that kids continued to make progress once we got back to school. So I'm certainly very hopeful that we get back to school during this year because everything happened so abruptly for everyone in administration, every teacher in every classroom, every principal. And so I want to thank the many teachers, counselors, school nurses, principals, the food service workers who you mentioned earlier, and our maintenance personnel, our security people for pitching in and doing everything that they can do to support the students. I know there are, I believe, thousands of teachers who are informally mentoring students and supporting students and being responsive to the needs of students. And you know, in a way, we are fortunate that this time of where we are with technology allows that to occur. And as the father of a Philadelphia teacher, I know that she's been working very, very hard to balance her child care needs for her children and also to support the children in her fifth grade classroom. So to the teachers that are out there pitching in, it is very much appreciated. And parents talk about it. It's noted on social media. I see teachers on social media asking questions of concern, asking questions of technique, asking questions of clarity, and I know that more information is going to be coming. So I really am in awe of the contributions that people have made that they're not required to make at this time. And I've worked with teachers during emergency situations before, and it's a very difficult thing that doesn't really happen in other professions, because when something happens in the world to a teacher, that teacher's concern is, how is this impacting me? But they also are thinking, what does this mean for my kids? The kids in my classroom, the kids in my school, and the same thing for principals. So I know it's a very stressful time, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who's doing their level best, and the people in central office as well, who are working day and night to try to do everything we can to feed and support children and families, and develop a plan to educate more consistently during times when the school buildings are closed, but schooling is not closed.
Thank you. Dr. McIver, I believe you had thoughts you wanted to share.
I did, thank you. I actually had a prepared statement, so I am just going to read it. So thank you. I wanted to thank everyone who's tuning into our action meeting. I know that the lives of every single person in the city changed abruptly on March 16th when schools were closed and parents were left to figure out how to adjust. Every day I wake up thinking that so many of our parents are essential workers who are reporting to hospitals, grocery stores, shipping companies, fire departments, police precincts, and more. I am also thinking about all of the parents who have suddenly found themselves without a paycheck and worrying about rent or buying groceries. This shutdown is impacting families in so many ways, and I am left to think, how can we as a board help ease the burden? For many, how to continue your child's learning has taken a backseat to other more understandably pressing issues. Yet for others, continuing to teach our kids is a most urgent call. To both groups, I say the school district knows this. Over the past week and a half, I have witnessed a school district that has brought all resources, human capital and otherwise, to bear in order to quickly pivot to a remote learning model. I've witnessed a school district address the large number of children who are food insecure and digitally divided from their peers by providing meals and learning packets to children in need. The numbers are staggering. But please realize that as we've seen our wealthier neighboring districts move fairly seamlessly to online learning, our district, and so many others like us across the country, are faced with challenges that are the result of unequal funding that this pandemic has only highlighted. In the coming weeks and months, we need to think and work strategically and creatively so that we are in a better place when we come out on the other side. This means being willing to look at the challenges that are being magnified by this crisis and mobilizing to ensure greater systemic changes to provide learning opportunities for all students. This is uncharted territory and we have no playbook, but we are Philly and we can do this. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. McIver. Let's see, Ms. Danzy?
Yes. I want to echo the same things that Dr. Menley said. These are scary times for all of us, and when we're dealing with so many unknowns, it seems sometimes overwhelming and cause fear to our continued existence, create stress in our homes, add to the trauma that so many of our children and families had already been experiencing, and particularly for our grandparents who are responsible for their grands. This can be doubly fearful as you work to balance the concerns for your grands, trying to maneuver how you're going to help them with their lesson plans, while at the same time fearful of what could happen to you from a health perspective. All these fears are exacerbated by feelings of having no means for controlling what is currently happening to us. I empathize with you, for many of your fears are mine also. But I want to commend all of you, especially our families who, in these uncharted territories, are trying as best they can to, one, adapt to having the kids home 24/7, the other, trying to find ways where you can help them continue their educational pursuit, as well as someone said, worrying about income for yourself. For our students who I've been extremely happy to see, a lot of them noting that I miss school. When is it going to open? That is the best thing I could ever hear. And then our incredible staff. First, those who are giving out those lunches, who in spite of health concerns and risk, are committed enough to come out and ensure that our kids have something to eat and that we're giving out the learning packs. To our teachers and staff overall, principals, who, in spite of being unable to teach your kids in a structured classroom, that you are not letting that stop you from being able to reach out to your students, trying in your best way to be a teacher. I'm extremely grateful to you and ask that you trust that though things have been quite chaotic at times, we will get through this together. And in fact, I'd like to say that also to the administrative staff who have been really struggling to try to run a school system right now without all of the help that they need. I know sometimes things get turned around. One time there's a message that will go out, and then the next we have to change it. That isn't because we're incompetent, I don't think. It's because so many things are changing as we speak, something else is going on. And so I'd like to say, even though I know how it is, we like to be able to make things as normal as possible in times that we don't understand. But sometimes it can't be that way. And so I'd like to say, even though you may see some things not going the way you want, know that that staff is trying above and beyond to try to provide to you. And at the end, I predict that we will be even stronger, more united, and surely more appreciative of the value of our children going to school and learning in a structured school environment. Thank you.
Our next board member wanting to speak is Mr. Huang.
Thank you, President Wilkerson. As we're tasked with the mission of educating students, I really want to thank our teachers for their creativity and perseverance in keeping that going under such unusual circumstances. I know it's the board's intention to make sure that in the absence of access to our buildings, the learning and the ancillary support services can continue with the attendant guidance to our staff and the necessary tech for all our students who need it. This transition will necessarily take time, but I would argue it's a necessary transition to supplement our in-classroom learning models with remote learning models and to have the infrastructure and strategy in place to do so equitably for all our students. And that's what we'll be working toward.
Thank you. Ms. Ahea Hinton, did you want to share some thoughts?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the district and all of our educators, their school staff, etc., city staff, administrative staff for everything that they're doing to support and educate our children. As a grandmother of school-age children, my life has been turned topsy-turvy in terms of little children running around, parents who are having to work from home and manage that experience of taking care of children and trying to educate them in that process, and being a support to my grandchildren while this is going on. And I've seen my family's day-to-day life change, and I know that my colleagues are experiencing many of the same things, and many of you that are watching and listening as well have seen this impact your lives similarly. But we're all dealing with a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And we definitely, as some of my colleagues have already mentioned, are in uncharted territory. And while we don't know when these things or when our lives will get back to normal, I am both optimistic and hopeful because I know that Philadelphians are resilient. I want to ask for your patience, and understanding as the board and the district move forward. There are a lot of unanswered questions. We've already learned a lot and have a lot more to learn. There will be more challenges, but please know that the board and the district, we all care. We are here because we care deeply about educating Philadelphia's children, and that's what's most important now. And we're going to stay focused on moving forward and doing everything possible to support and educate our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fix Lopez, I think you had a statement you wanted to give.
Yes, thank you. I prepared a statement as Board Member MacGyver. So I'm just going to read that. This crisis is a wake-up call. We should be outraged that our most vulnerable communities and children our children who are at most risk. We should be outraged that our most vulnerable communities and children are at most risk as a result of the coronavirus crisis and school closures. And then that achievement gap will likely widen during this time. We should be more outraged because, despite the new crisis, this is not a new story. It is a very familiar story. Decades of underfunding of our cities and our public education system negatively impacting our children. And we should all be outraged because if you live in Philadelphia, public education impacts your life. I thank our educators and our district for doing a lot with a little over the past 2 unprecedented weeks. Moving forward, I am hoping all Philadelphians can stand together to do even more. Here's my commitment during this incredibly difficult time: that the board and district communicate as effectively as possible, that we are honest, acknowledge mistakes, and do what we can to build trust, that the board supports the district in every way possible while holding it accountable for serving our children and families. At the same time, our city must move forward in a way that shows we are all outraged, that we are all impacted, and that we are all doing everything possible for justice for our children. We need to both address the immediate needs of the moment and to right historical wrongs like underfunding our children and our schools. It is the only way we will really get to the other side of this crisis, and it is the only way to do right by our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fix Lopez. Mr. Walker, Vice President Walker, do you have something you want to share?
Thank you, Madam President. Our colleagues have been extremely eloquent, and I certainly do agree with all that has been said in every single way. But we are in a crisis, and a crisis will help a community determine its character and commitment to make tomorrow a better day. I am convinced that with one system of schools, with one city of Philadelphia, with everything that we have seen to date, even with one state of Pennsylvania, that we will get through this crisis together. We'll be stronger, students will be more educated, and we will have a brighter future tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Dr. McColgan, did you have thoughts you want to share?
Yes, thank you, President Wilkerson. As I hope everyone by now knows, the board is truly committed to assuring that each and every student in the city of Philadelphia receives a world-class education that's beyond compare, and we're doing everything we can to take steps to make that happen. However, as a district responsible for almost 204,000 students and thousands of staff, first and foremost, we're responsible for ensuring the safety and well-being of our students and staff. In light of the current pandemic and risks of potentially life-threatening illness, I applaud the district for first addressing the almost Herculean task of assuring that students still have access to meals to assure that their basic needs are met. No child, of course, should ever go hungry. But now that that effort is well underway, it's our job to ask the board questions, our job as the board to ask questions, to expect more, and as you will hear in the public participation that was submitted in the written testimony, one of the participants asks the district to kick it up a notch, and that's what I'm asking for us to do. Necessity is the mother of invention, and as Americans, we've always risen to the challenges set before us. Dr. Height and everyone else involved in our staff, I thank you for all your hard work in figuring out how to get Chromebooks to each and every student. Every Philadelphia child having the technology they need to be a 21st century student will be one silver lining to come out of this crisis. But now we need all hands on deck to find creative and innovative solutions to meeting the needs of our students and families. I couldn't agree more with another of the submitted written comments that we're going to hear, saying that we're wasting a rich resource if we're not involving our teachers, nurses, counselors, behavioral specialists, and others in the solutions. As my husband, who's a high school president, always says, allow principals to lead and teachers to teach. They know their community and they know their students. If we set high expectations while providing guardrails and guidelines, our teachers and students just might exceed our expectations. Finally, I hope that we're working with the counselors, nurses, behavioral specialists, the staff who support our English learners and other support service providers to find ways to provide services to families and students, be it by virtual visits or at the very least by telephone. Our families need us. Social distancing should not mean social isolation. Again, I truly want to thank you all for your hard work, especially Dr. Height and his team, and those that are giving out the meals at these sites. But we can and must do more. And I look forward to see how we continue to rise to the challenges that are ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before we continue with this month's committee reports, I'd like to note for the viewing audience that this marks the end of the time that we have for collecting and reviewing public comments. We'll share this back with you during the speakers part of the meeting. So I want to thank everybody who has been sharing input along the way, and we'll hear from you in a few minutes. Due to this week's cancellation of the Finance and Facilities and Student Achievement and Support Committee meetings, we'll only have a brief report from the Partnership and Community Engagement Committee. And also, I believe we have a report from our student reps. And so with that, I'll call on Ms. Danzy. Are you giving the report?
Members of the Parent and Community Advisory Council have been sharing feedback and identifying areas of concern from their communities with us. Some of the themes that we've heard since March 13th have included the following: limited access to resources for students and families. Concerns have been raised that some school sites are not close enough for students and families to walk. Some recreation centers have been open for activities while others do not allow entry and are serving meals on the sides of the street. And families with children enrolled in special education programs and English language learners have expressed concerns on the lack of educational material being provided to their communities thus far. In the area of communication, many families are unaware of the resources that are available to them during this public health crisis. Some have suggested that a robocall be sent out to families to inform them of the resources being distributed by the district and the closest location to their school. Teachers are unclear on the best way to communicate with their students and have requested clarity around ways for students to access material, such as where to pick up lesson guides, how has the district communicated with families thus far, robocalls, etc. Families are reporting that there is inconsistency between schools and how they are communicating with students during this time. Some families have reported their teachers have been in communication with them, while others have reported that they have not heard any communications. Some parents have also reported concerns regarding the Learning Guide hotline. Specifically, they noted having a negative experience when their questions were not answered. They feel helpless and unable to help their children. Another reported concern was regarding the hours of the district hotline, which may not be accessible to caregivers, and that was one of mine too, who are working as essential employees that must report to work daily. Members of the Advisory Council have also communicated questions from their communities pertaining to the rest of the school year. One parent asked, "How will my student be graded?" Some students needed these last 2 weeks of the quarter to get their grades up, and now they don't have their opportunity anymore. What will this mean for them? This is in the report. Thank you.
For the public that doesn't know, the Parent Advisory Council is the entity that was formed as a result of changes to the Home Rule Charter. They are part of the voice that we hear from the community, and want to thank all of them for their work in providing accurate feedback to us, if not always kind feedback. And so we take your comments to heart, and we'll be looking to provide responses. Dr. Height, I believe you've answered some of the questions, but we're hearing additional concerns, and we'll work on making feedback available in some of the ways that you talked about before. Our next report is from our student representative, Doha Ibrahim.
Thank you, Madam President. These past several days have been the most challenging, putting stress on students, parents, and district employees. I understand everything came up very rapidly, but as a district, you handled it very well and gave students reassurance. One of our many ways of reaching out to students is our social media platform. We have uploaded upcoming cancellation meetings, sites where they obtain their grab-and-go lunches, and most importantly, engaging by asking questions to have an understanding of what they're going through. We have 3 sets of questions, which are, what are your thoughts about COVID-19? What are your current feelings? And what questions do you have for the remainder of the year? These are the students' thoughts and concerns. When would the schools possibly reopen? If we don't return back to school this year, will we resume back to the same grade? My teachers are still assigning me work. Do I have to do it? How will we make up missed instructional time? And will classes extend through the summer? Since PSSAs are canceled, what will next year 8th graders do when applying to high schools? I don't have internet access and proper technology at home. What can I do? How will we take our AP and Keystone test? I miss being at my after-school program so much. Our volleyball season might be over because of quarantine. Students have been asked to complete schoolwork at home, and while they have computers and technology, it is not the same when a student does not understand an assignment. There is no teacher or the one-on-one connection where they can ask for help. I am easily distracted at home and not getting work done. Besides the questions we have posted, we also received personal messages from students. This message came from a student who wanted to stay anonymous. This is awful. I haven't left my house in days, and it's making me feel very bad, anxious, depressed, sad, and extremely unsure. I just want to know how long we're going to be out for school. I know everything's changing and we don't know what's to occur, but I want to go back to school. It is a safe space for me, and it keeps me busy. We will continue to stay active on social media and update important information that the Philadelphia School District is releasing and the Mayor's office. We also want to share that all K-12 learning guides should be printed at every meal site and can also be accessed online. If you have any further questions or concerns, you can email us at studentboardrep@philasd.org or contact us on Instagram or Twitter at PHL Student Reps. I can't conclude without thanking all our food service staff, school safety staff, volunteers, teachers, administration, and the school district for standing together and making it possible to get through this demanding time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ibrahim. The insights that you and Amir provide help us better understand why we do what we do, and we'll certainly work with you to make sure that you can use your communication, social media, to provide answers to some of the questions that you brought to us. And so I want to thank you again. Would also like to announce that the district is about to undergo its search for Mr. Ibrahim and Mr. Williams' successor, Ms. Ibrahim and Mr. Williams' successor. The 2021 Student Board Representative applications have been released publicly on our website. Applications are available on the board's website and will be accepted through May 22nd. We'll be doing a lot of outreach so that we get a real pool of potential candidates. Next on our agenda is public comment portion of tonight's meeting. This month we received 20 pieces of written testimony and 0 spoken testimony via our voicemail. I've asked Dr. McAlkin and Ms. Fix-Lopez to each read a piece of testimony in its entirety for the record, and then we'll go through entering into the record the rest of the feedback that we've received. So with that, Dr. McAlkin.
Thank you, Madam President. As you may have stated, we're going to be reading the written testimony in topics. The first topic is the response to COVID-19, of which there's 12 comments, and then we'll have Dr. Height comment on each topic before moving on to the next topic. The first written comment is from Sylvia Diaz, who is a parent. She states, I understand the district has not provided students with distance instruction in part because they believe that federal disability laws present insurmountable barriers to remote education. The Office of Civil Rights, however, has been consistent in taking the position that ensuring compliance with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Section 504, and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act should not prevent any school from offering educational programs through distance instruction. It does our Philadelphia students a huge disservice to offer less than what is being provided in other nearby wealthy school districts. Our students deserve better.
The next piece of written, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
The next piece of written testimony is from Mindy Barbakoff, who is a community member. And it says, during this crisis, all children need the materials to learn. Support our children.
The next is from Miss, I don't know if it's a Miss or Mrs. Yaraliz Montez, a parent, states that I feel the school district is not doing enough since I haven't been able to get in the learning packages from the grab-and-go meal site. They have been telling me to go online, but I am not able to print it out. I feel they need to do more for the students. Thanks.
We now have one sharing this.
Can we make sure we get that individual's contact information so we can get that information?
Yes, I'll send that to you. I'll send you the name.
The next one is from Sherry Michaud. In the current coronavirus crisis, staff and administration of the SCP have been understandably concerned about equitable access for all students, including those with special needs, to online virtual instruction. I am sure that the public applauds the SCP's plan in this rapidly evolving and unpredictable situation to distribute computers and to work with Comcast to ensure internet connections in every student's home, as well as the lightning turnaround in the production of educational packets and other resources for students in the interim. Everything seems to be in flux, and policies and instructional approaches will continue to evolve to meet the challenge. One possible upside of the current crisis is, however, the opportunity to consider how well the district has been addressing the learning needs of English learners and other learners with special needs, and how it will accommodate these students' instructional requirements through the online medium. The attention now being paid to these students may, it is hoped, pay off in more appropriate instructional approaches and policies in the long term as well. As an expert in English learner education, it has been clear to me that the needs of English learners have been poorly understood and only superficially addressed by the district for decades. Despite criticism and pleas from administrators, teachers, parents, and community activists, little attention has been paid to this population in the development of policies toward, for example, assessment, continuity instruction, special L program design, high school selection, or teacher development, to name only a few issues. English learners have suffered through incomprehensible content area classes, have been assigned homework and home projects that were not adjusted to their linguistic needs, have been placed in newcomer programs that do not ensure college and career readiness, have been assessed and graded without fair consideration of their linguistic levels, and have even been blamed for a school's lack of stellar SPR scores. School administrators and teachers have not been held accountable enough for accommodating these students' academic, linguistic, and social needs, or even understanding what those needs are. It does not come as a surprise to most people that ELS, particularly those at beginner and intermediate levels, would not be able to handle the recently distributed educational materials designed for native speaker students and would most likely not have parents at home who could help them in English language assignments. I believe efforts have been made to provide some scaffolded materials packets, at least for high school students, but the same level of concern for these students' access to comprehensible instruction has been sadly lacking before this crisis. How many materials and assignments have been sent home with absolutely no consideration of the resources that children would have to complete them successfully? How many classes were delivered with no concern for EL's lack of listening skills or relevant vocabulary? How many times have newcomers been seated in the back of the room, lost in a fog of confusion or acting out because of frustration? How many parent conferences were missed by EL's parents because of school's unwelcoming culture? We can definitely do better, and perhaps through this current challenge, we will learn how to do that. I have several suggestions for the move to create online instructional materials and experiences, suggestions that should also be applied more generally in improving EL education. This is just an initial stab at addressing the challenge. First, it is crucial to involve veteran ESOL educators in collaborating to create or adapt materials, units, activities, projects for learners at different levels of language proficiency, grades K to 12. Sadly, the majority of 440 staff in the multilingual office, with some notable exceptions, have little expertise or experience in ESOL instruction as compared to master ESOL teachers across the city. We are wasting a rich resource if we don't involve teachers and compensate them in helping to create instructional materials for this new platform. At one time, back in the days when legal pressure was on the district to accommodate ELs, teachers were actively recruited to assist with creating curriculum and selecting materials. I understand that OMCP has already been working on some accommodations to the materials packets, and that should, of course, continue, but with much more active input from teachers. Second, somebody's phone, Dr. McColgan, I believe your phone is not muted.
Sorry.
Second, guidelines for content area teachers working with ELS Online should be published by OMCP based on best practices from QTEL, and, once again, drawing on the expertise of veteran teachers of sheltered classes, particularly soliciting ideas from QTEL-trained teachers. These guidelines should also contain a set of reminders about resources, online dictionaries, bilingual resources, etc., that teachers may share with their EL students. Third, I hope that ESOL class is not disregarded when thinking about online instruction. Because of an ill-considered move to push in instruction in the last years, students have not been receiving much or any targeted language support in some schools. With the online format, it would be possible for students to participate in ESOL classes at their level, in which students would be given the kinds of grammar, vocabulary, and reading support that once was a part of a fully developed and research-supported language program. If the SDP develops lessons for each grade, ESOL teachers could provide the kind of adjunct instruction, repeating the main idea, reinforcing language of the lesson, providing more oral participation opportunities that is unfortunately not offered anymore in most schools. This face-to-face instruction, albeit by Zoom or other platforms, could truly allow students to progress linguistically and find greater academic success. It is an opportunity not afforded many ELs during the non-vibrant school year. Fourth, with computers in the house,
excuse me,
now be able to reach
Ms.
out.
Fix Lopez, can you summarize some? Don't want to create the, we're trying to hold to our approximately 3-minute limit, and I don't, if we're going to run over for one person, we need to do it for everybody, and I don't think we have that kind of time.
Sure,
so
I don't have a timer. I wasn't sure if I was being timed or not. We need to support, English learners better, and that is something we can start now and should carry through.
Thank you. And the full testimony will be entered into the record, and it's also posted on the website. So I want to thank the person, Ms. Michaud, for taking time, and we will follow up on this. So thank you.
The next comments are by Andrea Moselle, community member, Our City, Our Schools, who states, the rapid shift to a virtual world because of COVID-19 highlights vividly the disparities families and children in Philadelphia and other low-income school districts with many children of color face. Already severely underfunded due to a variety of causes, including the fact that Pennsylvania doesn't distribute all of its basic education funds through a fair funding formula, perpetuating ongoing and documented racial disparities in funding. We are now watching education grind to a halt for kids in our district when schools close due to the virus. At the same time, students in nearby suburban districts in our region continue to have access to regular instruction and the stabilizing support of teachers and classmates, while Philadelphia students do not. We are particularly concerned with how the board is engaging our students with disabilities, English language learners, those living in poverty, students of color, students in foster care, and students experiencing homelessness. But this isn't just about the digital divide of laptops and internet access. At the same time as the kids are adrift without a way to connect to school, many families are also feeling that the district has forgotten them. At a time, access to clear and supportive communications on a regular basis and the opportunity to share their experiences, concerns, and questions, as well as their ideas and suggestions for fixing the problems, is lacking. Anxiety rises when families are not receiving the regular updates they need from the district and are not being given an opportunity to participate in the Board of Education action meetings in a virtual but live forum where questions can be asked and answers and ideas can be exchanged. We appreciate some of the responses that the school district and the city have made in recent days, such as finding solutions to continuing meal distribution, sending home lesson packets, hotlines in many languages, and updating the website. And we are happy to hear that Chromebooks are on the way, but more is needed. We need a commitment to robust, respectful, open, and two-way communication between district and Board of Education leadership and the stakeholders in the district. Students, parents, teachers, and other staff play a critical role in bridging some of the disparities we face when catastrophes like COVID-19 threaten to widen them. We are counting on you to invest your considerable ability to be creative and innovative and find a way. Community groups like the one I am part of are here to support these efforts.
Okay, the next one is from Laura. Sorry, give me 1 second. Laura Del Castillo. She is a district staff member, and it says, "What is going to be the role of support staff, such as BCAs, bilingual counseling assistants, class assistants, climate, if the district decided to implement online learning during the current crisis?"
Man Queen Lin, a parent, submitted her testimony in Chinese. She states, "I want to talk about special education services. I want to know how the school district can help my child if I can't go back to school in the short term. I did not receive ABA, language, occupational therapy, and other treatment services while my child was at home, which will cause my child's language communication and social skills to decline, and it will be difficult to follow instructions. The student's guide for special needs on the district website is all in English. For me, it was very difficult and overwhelming."
Okay, the next is from Barbara Dowdall, a community member. "I'm encouraged in this time of disturbing crisis by the combination of Comcast's offer of free internet access for the moment and the School District of Philadelphia committed to ensuring that every public school child in every household will be provided with their own Chromebook. This is a moment when we will perhaps come to understand and acknowledge the long-standing inequities in education opportunities that have not been addressed by the school district, nor, to be honest, local and state funding sources, and that robust planning for rectifying these gaps can begin now. I know that every teacher is eager and willing to make use of the opening and expanding communication avenues to interact with their students in meaningful and fruitful ways. The Board of Education, in addition to facilitating access to these avenues, can lay the groundwork for quality instruction when the day comes to resume academics, technical subjects, art, music, and physical education in person. The board itself is at a critical and thus significant moment in time. Having been reappointed in its entirety, although going forward without two of its original members, Wayne Walker and Dr. Chris McGinley, your work has, as a team, been powerfully affirmed by Mayor Kenny. This is the juncture where you, and the superintendent as well, can most clearly distinguish yourselves from the School Reform Commission, its policies, practices, and shortcomings. Decide now that you are prepared to restore the School District of Philadelphia as a system with uniformity in provision of basics, safe and inviting environments, small class sizes, fully resourced and professionally staffed libraries, proper proportions of school nurses and counselors, dependable opportunities for cultural enrichment on-site and off, varied and valuable after-school programs that meet the needs of working families. As Temple University founder Russell Conwell might have said, we are wasting a rich resource if we don't involve teachers and compensate them in helping to create instructional materials for this new platform and for the bountiful and empowering curricula going forward. I just want to make one request to board members. If anybody has their phone on, if you can put it on mute. And Dr. McColgan, if you and I can rotate, so I'll mute now as you talk and then you mute as I talk. There's just feedback.
Okay. The next is Beth Bittler, district staff. She states, good evening. My name is Beth Bittler, and I am submitting, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and I'm submitting my oral speech for the school board meeting scheduled for March 25th, 2020. I have been employed as an elementary school counselor for the School District of Philadelphia since 1997. Over the past 23 years, I have worked supporting students kindergarten through 8th grade. In my current school, I service 630 students K through 5. I am here today to address the issue of the behavioral health counselor position that was recently posted on the SDP website. While we can all agree there is tremendous amount of need to address behavioral health services with our students, we can also agree that more school counselors need to be hired to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students. What is confusing is how this position was specifically named. In doing so, the newly created position has taken all of the current responsibilities that elementary and secondary school counselors are currently performing and renaming it strictly to behavioral health. For the last 16 years, while the STP was under state-controlled rule, the PFT was not able to negotiate for anything other than salary and benefits for its members. School counselors' roles have shifted dramatically due to the higher needs of being trauma-sensitive. Most of our students have experienced some form of trauma. We have a tremendous opportunity to meet the needs of students from an academic, social, emotional, and college vocational role. In the past, the old term guidance counselor simply helps students match up with career-based vocations. Currently, school counselors, such as myself, are performing and identifying as educational leaders in the building. I personally sit on my school's leadership team, and I feel that my professional recommendations are respected and heard. School counselors not only meet with students and parents, but analyze school data, develop interventions to help students meet their MTSS goals. School counselors directly affect their school achieving its school-wide anchor goals set by the district and state. If schools want to achieve their school-wide progress, we must have a trauma-sensitive lens in order to help students cope and get connected to services they desperately need. Ultimately, there is no difference between the existing elementary school counselor position and the new position of behavioral health counselor. It is a duplicate position with a different name, hence creating confusion with students and parents and could create adversity among district staff. It would be impossible to function proficiently as a school counselor without addressing behavioral health issues and crisis, as well as the behavioral health counselor to address issues without relating to academics, truancy, etc. As I stated earlier, we can all agree that the students in Philadelphia schools deserve and need more school counselors to help them succeed, as well as help schools achieve their school-wide goals. Research shows that school counselors have a direct correlation statistically in reference to student achievement and school-wide achievement. I respectfully urge the school board to adjust the position title of behavioral health counselor back to elementary or secondary school counselor. We already have enough confusion in the world currently. We don't need any more in our schools. Thank you.
Next piece of testimony is from Shakita Gaines. Good afternoon, all. My name is Shakita Gaines. I'm the Philadelphia Home and School Council President. I wanted to speak on the topic of communication to the public, particularly questions in response to Heights live stream. We appreciate your commitment to engage with school families weekly on Facebook live stream. Seeing young people, parents, families, school staff, and community members share their concerns and questions publicly and without backlash is what we've been fighting for. In this time of community, seeing our love for each other, the power to strengthen the meek, voice concerns, and create change is wonderful to see. However, we ask that if Dr. Height is going live, we demand that a portion of that live broadcast be dedicated to reading and answering questions. We understand that some questions are redundant, require planning, and or require lawyers' input. Those questions are up in the air. But for those stakeholders who want to know about job safety, qualifications for supportive services such as Chromebooks, where they can find support for ELs, ELA, IEPs, 504s, please respond. Also, if the board doesn't have an answer yet, that is information that school families and stakeholders deserve to know as well. In addition to your commitment to communicating with the public, Please make available links to this weekly live stream on the SVP site banner and all live streams thereafter. We also understand that in these times of uncertainty, the unexpected is to be expected, but we expect our leaders to be open, honest, and engaging. Thank you for trying. Now go up 4 notches.
Excuse me, Board Member Fix Lopez, could you repeat the name and affiliation of that person who submitted that testimony?
Sure. Shakita Gaines. And Shakita is the president for the Philadelphia Home and School Council.
Thank you.
Next is Cecilia Thompson, community member, who states, "Good evening, School Board President Wilkerson, School Board members, Superintendent Dr. Height, school district staff, students, families, and community. My name is Cecilia Thompson, and my topic this evening are the lack of educational learning materials, supports, and services for special education students. First, let me start by saying these are trying and difficult times during this pandemic. This is our version of the bubonic plague. The sacrifices being made by all, including students and their families, and the staff and their families with the district, are much appreciated. However, both versions of the learning packets do not address the needs of students receiving special education services. The answers given for families are, pick the appropriate grade and packet for your special needs child. These learning packets are for teachers to develop lesson plans for students. Maybe in September 2019, with the proper instructions to prepare lessons for a special needs child, these would be appropriate. But during these challenging and uncertain times for families, including those who are deemed necessary and risking infection from being in the public, reading and coming up with lessons for any child is difficult. Devising lessons for children receiving special education academic supports and services is almost impossible. Some challenges include: 1, disruption in routines for children living with intellectual disabilities and autism. 2, extreme behaviors due to the disruption. 3, the tension and stress in households as financial resources are being depleted due to cut in hours or total loss of employment. 4, children not understanding why they are not in school with their friends and not having the language to express such, causing challenging behaviors. Furthermore, the resources, for example, for students living with autism are about scheduling and the coronavirus and not instruction. And the occupational therapy material suggests families become school-based occupational therapists to complete these tasks. This is simply unacceptable to put families who are having the aforementioned challenges and more being at home with their special needs children. By now, the district has received guidance from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, which received guidance from the Office of Special Education Programs, stating local education agencies for FAPE, providing learning supports and services to students receiving special education services. So what can the district do to provide FAPE for their special education students? Below are some suggestions. 1, at a minimum, inform all special education teachers they can provide materials to families for their students. Families can have the option to pick up these materials from the school, pick up the materials at a school near them. Many special education students are bused to schools outside their neighborhoods, or email the work to students. Note, some special education teachers were doing so, but were told not to by their principal through communication from district last week. Because this document has not been made public, I cannot comment on the contents and therefore do not know if there was a misunderstanding of the communication. 2, have meetings with families via business, Skype, Zoom, or a phone call on how to best provide the other services the students are receiving, such as speech, OT, ABA, or other supports. If students were using intervention in schools, provide families with the appropriate information to access these programs at home. If they need technology and internet access, this, per articles where Dr. Height was quoted, be available to these families. 4, the materials for complex needs learners is not what those students were doing in school. For this population, a communication between their teacher and families is paramount. In terms of communication with families, educators are to be mandated to communicate with families at times convenient for families and not the educators. These are families who are the first responders, hospital workers, those at testing sites, those that work at grocery stores, and any other worker deemed necessary to sustain life as per Mayor Kenny's order. Need to have conversations at times other than between the hours of 9 and 5 p.m. Moreover, while not pertaining to the special needs population, the hours for the learning materials of 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. are not convenient for working families. Please consider 6 to 8 p.m. for those who desire to speak to a live person, and those on the phones need to be educators. When I used the hotline, the person admitted not being an educator. Instead, my information was referred to a special education director, which gave me the information on the website. Finally, please consider having a Zoom-type communications with families to hear their concerns. While it would not be live streamed, it can be recorded and listened by the public within 24 hours. Families and the community do want help. They need a way to communicate with the Board of Education live so they feel heard and their comments valued and appreciated. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my comments in writing this evening.
Next piece of testimony is from Donna Cooper, Executive Director of PCCY. I commend the board and the superintendent for attending to the urgent nutritional needs of the tens of thousands of low-income children in this crisis. Your rapid response to deploy meals is a testament to the capacity of the leaders of this district and the thousands of district employees who are willing to put the interests of our city's children first. I am here with a simple request that the same diligence and commitment be applied in ways that enable the district to teach our children now. As the virus's spread intensifies, the resumption of classes in our school buildings seems very unlikely. We must come to terms with this fact and hasten the process of making teacher-supported home-based instruction the norm for the balance of the school year. Parents watched in horror as federal, state, and district officials twisted themselves up in illogical arguments that led instruction to stop cold. Finally, teachers have been given the green light. The engine of the district must turn wholeheartedly toward instruction. Every teacher, classroom aide, special education contractor, high school guidance counselor, and contracted infrastructure like Gear Up must be used to educate our children now. In this emergency, you must take control of the instructional calendar. This emergency must compel you tonight to update the school calendar so that instruction is not suspended through spring break. Our students and our parents need you to do what is expected of you. Our students have had a break, 2 weeks to be precise. It's time to start teaching our students. That brings us to the technology challenge. Parents understand this is more than just hardware. It's ensuring teacher support, materials, and wireless access. And parents know it's about making sure that for special education and English language learners, technology and teacher support is deployed that meet their needs. But here's what we know. 37 other school districts in the 5-county region of southeastern Pennsylvania have already given out laptops or comparable devices to all or most of their students, and instruction is commencing. We also know that 9 days ago, the Miami-Dade School District distributed devices to 53,000 students, and last week, Boston, New York City, and Broward County ensured that students who needed devices received them. Together, these districts are kicking off online teacher-supported instruction to more than 1.7 million students. I've attached an Excel package with this testimony and links to each district so you can see for yourself that others are already teaching their students. Parents and students didn't miss the fact that the superintendent announced that soon technology will be made available to students, but 2 weeks is too long. The evidence I presented tonight demonstrates that it's possible to deploy technology and support instruction. We are here tonight to ask you to mandate an accelerated timeline so that teachers can teach and our kids can learn. Here's what we would like to see. A date certain, and no later than April 6th, when the dissemination of technology will commence so that we can have confidence that the digital divide is quickly being bridged and instruction can proceed. A date certain, and no later than April 6th, for an initial rollout of online teacher-supported instruction. We understand that such a plan will get better and more detailed over time. And lastly, a date certain, and no later than April 15th, when teacher-supported home-based instruction will commence for special education students and English language learners.
Thank you, Ms. Fix-Lopez. Also, the board received some general questions on this topic. While they were not submitted as written testimony, I want to read these now as well, so we are sharing the many types of questions we've been receiving. The questions are, 1, for kids with medication stored at schools, has there been any retrieval plan? 2, what has the district and board's outreach been regarding passing information on the public health crisis and public assistance for families who need support, especially those with limited English, i.e. robocalls, letters, emails, etc., in the appropriate languages to the families? Are teachers or other staff making contact with all the families? Is there any specific planning or communication to seniors and CTE students? How are we handling kindergarten enrollment? This is a moment where there is intense stress on principals and in particular They have asked for guidance on how to formally have teachers reach out to families, looking for resources on how to have teachers do this systemically, support and direction from the district on how to make this outreach. From individuals at 2 to 3 meal sites have shared concerns that the specifics of the pickup were not allowing for distancing. There are not enough protocols for doing this in a safe way. Are we considering a delivery option? New York is doing this via cabs to get meals to older folks in need. Could you prioritize this for families in need? What are the timelines we can give about when we can communicate unexpected updates? This is helpful for managing questions. For example, when will we have answers on bug topics like graduation, disabilities, etc.? Dr. Height, can you please share some responses to any of the questions you've heard raised here, or when you expect to have answers to these questions?
Thank you, Dr. McCogan, and thanks for the questions. Some of those we had already responded to in the opening comments. We plan to have more direct information next week about the graduations, particularly as it relates to seniors and young people that are in CTE programs. We will have specific directions. We have a draft already of what we're asking everyone to do with respect to contact and communication. The unexpected topics, we are trying to capture as many of those as we can and add those to whatever communication we distribute. The medication retrieval, I have to get more information about that. I actually do not have a response to that, but we can get information about that. I would recommend that if there's a need to retrieve medication from schools, that individual call the hotline and leave that information or use the email address that I provided, COVID-19 info@philasd.org. And so, yes, there you have it.
We'll be posting additional information as the details are available, and so encourage people to follow the website. Dr. Height will be on Facebook again next Wednesday, providing responses to some of the questions that have been raised over the course of the last week and updating information.
Yeah, and I would just add the social distancing, particularly when individuals are picking up meals, or how we're thinking about the distribution of the technology. We'll have more information about that. We're getting much better at that at the sites. It's one reason we went to fewer sites, more sites on fewer days, but we're having more individuals actually come out to get the meals. And so we are working on a plan to create that or expand or adjust the hours so that individuals are spread out more throughout the day.
Thank you. Next, I believe it's Dr.
President Wilkerson, we still have more testimony to read. Yeah, that was just like an intermission.
I'm sorry, you took a breath. Please continue.
Thank you. So we're going to continue with reading public testimony for the other topics we received, and the next is public comment at board meetings, and then after this section, we have one more round. The first is from Dong Lee, a community member, Viet Lee, stating, Dear President Wilkerson and members of the Board of Education, we write to you concerning the protocols for the March 26, 2020 action meeting. Holding a meeting that the public cannot attend in person violates the PA Sunshine Act. But of course, the board must heed the health warnings from city and state officials. The alternative is to hold a virtual meeting that the public can both observe and participate in. Current technology allows for both of these. The board has announced that it will live stream the meeting at the scheduled time. Members of the public can send in testimony in writing or by phone no later than the 24 hours before the meeting. Members of the board will read summaries of these testimonies. That is not a public meeting. This is a live TV show. We have been told that most board members will present via phone. That same technology could be used to have members of the public testify via phone. People could submit their numbers by calling in advance or emailing their phone numbers and topics before the meeting. Staff could call them at the appropriate time before or after voting, and each person could give their own testimony in full in their own words. Everyone watching would be able to hear the testimony. In addition, some of the questions and comments sent via email and Twitter could be answered during the meeting. The Chief Financial Officer will be making a presentation on the lump sum budget. Without real-time participation, no one would be able to ask a question about that presentation. Testimony sent in ahead of time could not be amended to include comments or questions about that or any other business taking place during the meeting. We have also asked that all non-essential items be withdrawn for now, and that each item description include a sentence explaining why it is essential and must be voted on this month. Thanks to the board for already withdrawing item 31. In this difficult time, it is important that the public be able to participate in the democratic process. The board must make a good faith effort using the technology available to include the public in this week's public meeting. We appreciate it. We appreciate being part of the conversation. We look forward to your response.
The next piece of testimony was submitted by Lisa Haver, community member, but it has been withdrawn.
The next is from Carol Kalimnik, community member, stating, since testimony is being summarized, I am focusing on two issues. During this crisis, technology is being used universally to facilitate meetings. The board needs to open up their meetings to the public so that those wishing to testify can call in and read their testimony. Having someone summarize is simply not adequate. We are using technology today during this crisis to hold meetings. These meetings include allowing voices to be heard and not simply summarizing their remarks. If I wanted someone to summarize, then I would send in a summary of my remarks. Otherwise, my voice is being filtered. My second point is that the board should only consider items that are essential. APS has noted repeatedly that the descriptions convey scant information about the item under consideration. Each item needs an explanation of why it is being contemplated during this pandemic. We realize that you are working at warp speed and under dire conditions to move forward. As government officials, you should lead the way for public participation, not simply providing a platform for your voices to be heard and ours summarized.
The next piece of testimony is from community member Aiden Castellanos. I'm incredibly disappointed that the school board is not having live public participation in their meetings. There's so many concerns that communities have right now that need to be addressed now. As the school board, you all have the responsibility to the people who depend on schools and having interactive, engaging meetings. I want to uplift the request that our city, our schools have made, including only essential items be voted on this month, all other items tabled. Take questions via email or Twitter during the live streamed meeting. If the question pertains to a specific item, read the question or comment just prior to the meeting so that the board members can answer before voting. Have staff members read the testimony of public participants. Testimony sent into the board should be considered oral testimony, not written testimony. Testimony of items should be read before the board commences voting. The board should inform the public of its decisions and actions by posting a banner on the homepage of the district website. Please meet the needs of the people you're supposed to be supporting.
Next is Deborah Grill, community member. The advent of the coronavirus has thrown our nation in a state of crisis. That is the new normal. Routine business has been thrown out the window as we are directed to practice social distancing and remain quarantined in our homes. I know that the board, Dr. Height, and district staff have been working diligently to meet the needs of Philadelphia students, parents, and teachers in this crisis, and I thank you all for that. While the board will live stream and televise this month's action meeting, there is no avenue for real-time comments and questions from the public. Submitting written testimony, which will be summarized and read aloud by staff, is not a substitute for open public interaction. I hope that in future meetings, the board will find a way to follow the Pennsylvania Office of Open Records advisory on making public meetings interactive. The Sunshine Act is clear that public meetings should be held at public buildings with open public participation whenever possible. If an official emergency declaration prevents that from happening, a meeting via teleconference, webinar, or other electronic method that allows for two-way communication is permissible in most circumstances. Some agencies may be governed by laws which add requirements beyond those included in the Sunshine Act. And she adds a website. I am sure that the district's technology is capable of providing such an electronic method. Parents, teachers, and students need the direct means of communicating with the board that these meetings would allow, especially in this time of crisis.
Okay, so the next piece of testimony comes from Eileen Postis, community member, and as you can expect, it has very specific directions to sing to the tune of Follow the Drinking Gourd. And it says to choose a good singer. I'm pretty sure I was not chosen because I'm a good singer. But here we go. Follow the Sunshine Act. Follow the Sunshine Act. For the public is awaiting to participate in meetings, so follow the Sunshine Act. COVID-19 makes assembling hard. People still want to be heard. Summarizing is not the same as testifying. Please follow the Sunshine Act. Follow the Sunshine Act. Follow the Sunshine Act. For the public is awaiting to participate in meetings, so follow the Sunshine Act. Technology affords us to help people express their views. Transparency builds trust, that's a fact, so follow the Sunshine Act.
That's the most compelling.
Wow.
Well
Just
done.
wow.
Yeah, you've gone above
You all
and beyond.
owe me. You all owe me.
That's right. Mallory, you need to drop the mic, literally.
A new day job for Mallory.
I
A new
know.
day job for Mallory.
Miss Poses didn't think she'd do it. Thank you.
That was
I had
great.
to
That was
study
great.
that, too.
I don't know that song.
Are there other testimonies?
Gilligan, isn't it? Gilligan Island?
There's two
What's
more.
There are
right.
two more. Yep. The next are on action items. The first is from Diane Payne, community member, relating to action items 16, 17, 24, and 32. Times of crisis call for our government officials and citizens alike to work in ways we never imagined. I do applaud all the work and worry that the SDP and Board of Education are engaged in at this moment. That being said, crises can not become a reason to ignore laws and transparency, nor a reason to silence or mute the public's voice. As this crisis stretches into future months, the board must rise to the available technological choices which can actively engage the public. It is already happening across a variety of sectors. For the April action meeting, this board should have a viable plan for real-time public engagement as the Sunshine Act requires. In times of crisis, only essential business should be handled, as all officials and citizens grapple with what the needs may be for the future. It was heartening to see action item 31 eventually withdrawn. However, I have questions about 4 other action items. Action items 16 and 17 were for multi-million-dollar increases to the ERP process. The details listed in the action items refer vaguely to a change in the implementation timeline, with no details justifying this timeline change. Although it would be easy to justify due to the crisis, this item was on the list before the crisis. The public deserves to fully understand the why and the how of a $59 million expenditure. Action item 24 is for a change order to the Ben Franklin SLA project. This is another example of no information about why this $1,798,148 change order is needed. The public deserves to understand. Action item 32 is for $638,565 to the AARP Literacy Volunteer Program. This is an example of closely examining all action items for a litmus test of essential. We are all very much aware that we cannot imagine what returning to normal is going to look like. Every expenditure on the action item list should contain a sentence throughout this crisis that identifies what is essential about the item. Transparency, public engagement, and trust in the district are ongoing places of conflict. This crisis actually offers an opportunity for the board to look for ways to mend these conflicts. Do not let this opportunity be lost.
Okay, and this is the last piece of testimony that I'll be reading, and then following up one more with Dr. McColgan, and then we're done. So this one is from Linda Rubin, community member, and it is related to contract action item. It's related to contract action items, such as 32. It says, I'm submitting this testimony in the expectation that since no setup has been made to allow for individuals to call in and read our own testimony, that my and all other testimonies will be read in full and not summarized. Summarized means the reader has the ability to pick and choose which parts of the testimony will be read and whether to include all of the actual wording or not. Any of these, including the intonation of the reader, could impact the meaning of testimony, even unintentionally. I realize that circumstances dictate changes. Changes, and changes are necessary. I urge the board to learn from appropriate staff what technical options are available or could be made available to assist that meetings be as close to actually attended meetings as possible. I think we made that happen with the song a little bit. The lack of an audience in the room, regardless of size, will affect the discussion by the board. That's just human nature. I also ask that the board increase its explanations of the details of items being voted on, especially where contracts are involved. Of course, contracts have to be prepared and agreed to in advance in order to allow for both the district and the company to put them into effect. But not all contracts are essential at this time, even for planning purposes. I also don't understand why the terms of contracts signed by a public entity like the school district shouldn't be made public. Descriptions are never quite as revelatory as the actual wording. I've heard testimony questioning the reason for any number of change orders and amendments to existing contracts. These changes should be explained. I believe that when this board first took over, you published contracts. We who attend meetings and who testify raise issues that are of concern not only to us individually, but to district staff, parents, and students. Some issues bring out more people, and sometimes the board or Dr. Height actually learns about something going on or not going on in the field and has expressed appreciation for learning about the issue and has then followed up. I appreciate the district's efforts to try to make the website more accessible. However, even I, with some knowledge of district operations, have had extreme difficulty finding things. I can only imagine how frustrating it must be for parents and community members without such knowledge. One of my favorite lines from the film, Philadelphia, is when Denzel Washington asks, "Explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old." That statement is deep. Running a large school district is daunting indeed. The more everyone shares how directives, plans, and oversight are playing out in actual schools throughout the city, the better, more equitable, and responsive our educational system will be. Thank you.
And finally, unless I'm missing a third one, Ms. Fix-Lopez, the board received the same email from the following individuals: Madeline Shikomba, Caroline Lazard, Aiden Castellanos, Kristen Gosling, John Colgan Davis, Tammy Murphy, Caitlin McCann, Alex Avalon, Alan Anthony, AJ Aaron, I don't know how to say this one, Yahya Alzrak, Malika Bender, Bryce Bayer, Nova McGiffert, and the email reads, "Hello, the COVID-19 pandemic is drastically shifting our lives, and this is not business as usual. It is more critical than ever that the board listen to and focus on the immediate needs, concerns, and proposed solutions of the school families during this time. Please implement the suggestions below in order to ensure that the Thursday meeting is accessible to our school communities. Only essential items voted on this month. All other items tabled. Take questions via email or Twitter during the live stream meeting. If the questions pertain to a specific item, read the question or comment just prior to the meeting so that the board member can answer before voting. Have staff members read the testimony of public participants. Testimony sent into the board should be considered oral testimony, not written testimony. Testimony of items should be read before the board commences voting. The board should inform the public of its decisions and actions by posting a banner on the homepage of the district website." So thank you. That concludes information on public testimony received by the board.
I want to thank the public for testimony that was provided prior to this meeting. As you can see, we have adjusted the way we've conducted this meeting, and so we've been receiving Twitter feedback during the course of the meeting. We've also had emails sent to us during the course of the meeting, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. McGinley, who will be providing some of the commentary that we've received.
Thank you. I did want to make one comment in response to some of the testimony that was read by members of the board, and really, and ask Dr. Height just to verify, or Lynn to verify. We're entering into contracts with various vendors and companies here, and in the event that for whatever reason they can't do the work, they don't get paid, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
These are you're granting permission to spend up to an amount for the work that's performed.
Right.
If the work is not performed, then those individuals do not receive that
So if
compensation.
a contract was for service for a year and a year didn't take a year, we didn't have a year, then they would be paid for the services that they provided.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I believe at the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, we had input from Mr. Munson about the ERP and some of the other contract items. We look forward to resuming our committee meetings in April, and so we'll be able to have fuller conversations about the proposed action items. Also, we'll continue to explore technology so we can do better.
And using technology, that's where I come in here. Thank you, President Wilkerson, and thank you to everyone who is watching from home tonight and sharing your questions and suggestions. As Board Member Wong shared at the start of the meeting, our staff have been monitoring Twitter and emails that have been coming in during the presentation portion of our meeting and through the statements made by board members. I will be reading each of the comments that has been submitted during this time. Our first comment comes from Cherie Ellison, asking the following questions. If schools are closed for the rest of the year, will you expect children to repeat the same grade, or will you pass them based off of third marking period grades? How will you determine who receives a computer? Should I do all the questions, and then, or you want to take them?
Yes, so we'll have an answer for the second question when we put that all together for graduation and all of the other questions that we receive with respect to the calendar. With respect to the technology, any student who indicates that he or she needs one will receive a Chromebook.
Next, the Caucus of Working Educators and Councilwoman Gim asked, is it true that staff at some district food distribution sites are asking kids who come for food where they are from and who they live with when they show up for food?
I don't know the answer to that question. The directions are certainly that no one was to ask for an ID, and any child that shows up at one of those sites should receive the meal, or any parent that shows up with children should receive the meals for each of those children. Those were directions that are given both to the school's safety officers and to the food service workers.
Next, Cecilia Thompson has submitted several questions. Some were in the testimony that was read on her behalf. Is Dr. Height's presentation on the coronavirus response available to the public to view? And if so, where can it be found? And I have a note here that it is posted with today's materials with the meeting. The supplemental resources for special education students are not lessons associated with their IEPs. How can families get instruction from their particular teacher? How can families get the speech, OT, PT, ABA, and other services? And how can families of students with disabilities who need computers to support learning programs contact the district on the need for this technology, as all teachers are not aware of the technology needs of their students? This also includes a household where a general education teacher would not know the technology needs of their students.
Yes, and as Ms. Thompson is correct, they should actually, as I indicated before, and I think Ms. Thompson talked about, she was then put in touch with a supervisor who just directed her to the hotline, directed her to the materials on the web. Asking individuals to call the hotline, and then the hotline individual who is not educated to answer that question with respect to that specific need for a child with special needs, then we will have an individual call her back who is an expert in that particular area, and we are tracking those calls, and we're tracking who calls back for what reason and what response or resources that those individuals are providing. To the final point, we are, Ms. Thompson, looking at all of the resources available to us via technology that we could get out to families with children that need specific services. And the reason for the supplemental help is to help the families with some of those activities. And we're trying to build our ability to do that technologically, and we're going to continue to do that work. So as you know of those websites, those enrichment or those activities that could be helpful, please make us aware of those things so that we can get that information out to individuals who are also looking for the same information.
And the next two comments go along those same lines about information for children with disabilities. Zoe Rooney states an individual submitted written testimony on how she called in about the special ed guides and materials, and that the people she talked to weren't educators and weren't able to meaningfully help her, and that needs to be addressed. Additionally, Zoe Rooney noted the agenda for this meeting was temporarily not available. This has been corrected, and it is now available on the website. I'm going to read the next one because it goes along the same lines. Next, from Colleen Sieber-Combs, she is asking for students who require learning support, such as Wilson reading instruction, and have an IEP with specific accommodations. How will their needs be addressed with online learning that begins on April 13? Will their usual special education instructor be able to supplement their classroom instruction remotely?
We're working to establish that plan. Right now, we're using the executive directors who work in the area of special education to provide the direct support to the families who are asking those questions. And so the hotline, the individuals responding or manning the hotline are to get that information from those parents to that executive director in special education, who would then reach out to that family member to understand what is needed and how best to get those individuals that resource.
So this is me asking this question. So next week, are you expecting more direction and more information on for parents on that?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Next is from Philly School Counselors United. We understand that coordinating distance learning is a monumental task. School counselors also need direction from the district about supporting students, mental health, confidentiality, college planning, etc.
Oh, yeah. Statement. I agree.
Statement. Okay.
Yes, and that's going to be part of the expectations that we send out for what we are asking everyone to do, and the guidance counselors are going to be a critical component to making sure we are connecting with children and their families.
Next, username Say It Loud noted this ability to ask questions and make comments during board meetings should always be available. And coincidentally, my wife texted that she cleaned 11 windows today. Next, Gretchen Cowell asks, are teachers calling students to make sure that they have picked up and are working on their instructional packets? Is telephone help available for questions on math problems or other homework in the packets? My impression is that most students have not picked up the packets, and that no one is checking on this.
Yes, we've asked teachers to actually remind their students to pick up the packets, and we have one of the reasons the hotlines were put into place was to help young people with responses that they would need, either in math or in English language arts, and now in particular with special education and with ELs. And so, yes, we recommend that individuals contact the hotline to ask for that information. That's what they're designed for. Although the individuals who are manning the hotline may not be able to answer their initial question, they'll get it to the individuals who can, and those individuals will call students back.
Next, from username Hot Donna, who says, I am excited about students receiving Chromebooks in addition to training on online learning, but what about families who do not have direct access to Wi-Fi? How will we be supporting them?
Yeah, part of this plan, part of the logistics around the plan is not only matching individuals to the various Wi-Fi plans, but also trying to understand where we may need mobile hotspots and distribute those hotspots to families that do not have the ability to access the internet or cable in their home.
And finally, the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools says they are happy to see at Philadelphia School Board taking questions during meetings at this time.
Thank you. Want to thank everybody who's who's reached out to provide testimony or input to the board. Getting your questions directly really does help us respond specifically to what you're thinking in this particular crisis. And so we will continue to work on our technology. The input that, or the recommendation that we have staff track Twitter and email was very helpful. And as you can see, we implemented that.
Yeah, and I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the staff for organizing this work and for getting everything together for us in this unusual circumstance.
That's right. I think the staff has done a yeoman's job trying to teach us all how to use Zoom. And we appreciate, all the hard work that's gone on, and hopefully it'll be a little smoother next time. But thank you so much to everybody. Next, I think we are now at the point that it's time to vote on this month's action items. Before we begin, I want to be clear about how I will be grouping tonight's votes. I will pull out student expulsion, item number 3, personnel items 6 and 7, and the emergency action items number 54, 55, and then Dr. McGinley, I believe you've asked to have 26, item number 26, which is the Ryan Avenue item, pulled out, and that'll be addressed separately. And so with that,
I had been advised that item 26 was going to be withdrawn. Is it?
Yes.
So it's withdrawn by the administration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, by the administration. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Thank you.
Action item number 1 is a resolution. Okay, action item 1 is withdrawn. So action item 1 was a resolution that pertained to charter school funding, and so that will be considered at the April board meeting. It's an important item. It has to do with legislative and changes, and so we encourage everybody to track this item, but we won't be voting it on it this month. It'll be held over till next month. Action items that'll be considered as part of the consent agenda are item 2, 4, and 5, 9 through 30, absent number 26, which was withdrawn, and then action items 32 through 53. Before we vote, are there any other items that a board member may want to have withdrawn from the consent agenda? Hearing none. Board members, can I have a motion and a second to vote on action items 2, 4 through 5, 9 through 25, and 25 through 30, and 32 through 53? I'm looking for a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions on any of those items?
It's 9 through 25, then 27 to 30.
9 through 25. That's right. I'm sorry.
27 to 30.
27 through 30. Without Lynn sitting next to me, I'm at a disadvantage. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions on any of those items? Hearing none. Ms. Rock, would you please call the vote?
Thank you, Madam President. I also, just for the record, I'm not sure if it was said, action item 31 was also withdrawn. So board members, I'm going to now ask for your vote on items 2, 4, 5, 9 to 25, 27 to 30, and 32 to 53. Ms. Danzy?
Yes.
Ms. Ahaya Hinton?
Yes.
Ms. Fix Lopez?
I'm going to abstain from action item 4, which is the acceptance of the grant from Penn State going to various providers for the SNAP program based on business relationships.
And how do you vote as to the rest?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Huang?
I am abstaining on action items 4 and 5. I am a yes to all other items.
Thank you. Dr. McColgan?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. McGinley?
Yes.
Thanks. Dr. McIver?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice President Walker?
Yes.
And President Wilkerson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to announce the votes for the record. Action item 4 was passed by a vote of 8-0 with 1 abstention. Action item 5 was passed by a vote of 7-0 with 2 abstentions. And action items 2, 9-25, 27-30, and 32-53 passed unanimously. Thank you.
I actually believe that it was action item 4 that was 7-0 and 5 is 8-0.
You are correct. Apologies. 4 passed 7-0 and 5 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Wong.
We will now take the individual votes, and the first vote will be student expulsion. That's action item number 3. And is there a motion and a second to consider action item number 3?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions? Hearing none. Ms. Rout, it's been moved and seconded. Would you please call the vote on this?
Thank you. Ms. Danzy?
Yes.
Ms. Ahaya Hinton?
Yes.
Ms. Hicks Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Huang?
Yes.
Dr. McColgan? Yes. Dr. McGinley?
Yes.
Dr. McIver? Was that a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice President Walker?
Yes.
And President Wilkerson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Action item number 3 passes. Our next items are action items 6 and 7. Both of these are personnel items, and we'll consider them together. May I have a motion and a second to consider action items 6 and 7?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Ms. Rout, please take the vote on that.
On action item 6 and 7, Ms. Danzy?
Yes.
Ms. Ahaya Hinton?
Yes.
Ms. Hicks Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Huang?
Yes to both.
Dr. McColgan?
Yes.
Dr. McGinley?
Yes.
Dr. McIver?
Yes.
Vice President Walker?
Yes.
President Wilkerson?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we still have to vote on action item number 8. Oh, I'm sorry. That was on the script. All right. Next, we have 2 walk-on items. Emergency. The first is an emergency action item number 54. It's a contract with CDI Technologies for the acquisition of 50,000 Chromebook computers for schools and students to address district-wide gaps in home access to computing devices created, access to home computing during the COVID school closure. Board members, may I have a motion and a second to adopt action item number 54?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions about action item number 54?
I have one question. I'm just curious. When students get the Chromebook, will it be like barcoded and assigned to them? And then, for example, if they're in 5th grade, that is their computer now until they graduate, or are they expected to then turn it back in at the end of this?
Yeah, we are distributing them as loaners now, but it will be assigned to, yes, it's barcoded and assigned to the student's information ID number. And so we could, yes.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Hicks Lopez?
I'm not sure what the yes is referring to.
Yeah, no, it is. So we are, I think the language that was used early on is that we are providing all of these as loaners to young people, and we can come back later to determine if that gives us an opportunity to use the computers more regularly as an assignment to a child throughout that child's education here in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions on action item number 54? Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded. Ms. Rout, please call for the vote.
Thank you. Ms. Danzy?
Yes.
Ms. Ahaya Hinton?
Yes.
Ms. Fix Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Huang?
Yes.
Dr. McColgan?
Yes.
Dr. McGinley?
Yeah, yes.
Dr. McIver?
Yes.
Vice President Walker?
Yes.
President Wilkerson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our final action item for the board meeting is action item number 55. It's a resolution authorizing the superintendent of the school district to take action necessary in furtherance of the school district's operations in the best interests of children during and as part of and necessitated by the school district, city, and state and federal COVID-19 response efforts. I'll note that this is a resolution that sunsets in a month, but we believe it gives the superintendent the flexibility to respond quickly as this situation unfurls. And so with that, is there a motion and a second to adopt emergency action item number 55?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I think that this is a very responsible action on the part of the board to provide the superintendent with a greater degree of flexibility as he faces the unknown in terms of what's happening in terms of community health, what policies might come from the state or from the city that he needs to react to quickly and responsibly, and having it for just the time between now and our next board meeting gives the board a way to maintain accountability and stay informed as to what is going on.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other comments on action item 55, I'm sorry. Hearing none, Ms. Rout, please.
Excuse me. I was hoping to get a description of how we anticipate we will review at our next board meeting how this additional authority has been handled from an accountability standpoint.
We can certainly ask for that. One of the things that it does provide is that the district report to the Student Achievement Committee regarding the plan for dealing with English language learners and special ed. So there are specific requests for feedback, but we can also make sure that the superintendent provides us with further statement about the extraordinary steps that were taken. Also, if there are any items that need to be ratified, they'll be identified separately. And so the board will have an opportunity to.
And there are actions that limited in scope in terms of the overall resolution, and there are also places where the superintendent needs to consult and collaborate with the president of the board or with committee chairs. So I agree with Lee that it's a good idea to get a report on it, but some of that is actually built into the resolution.
Yeah, and I also appreciate the mechanism for reporting back to student achievement in particular, so that the North Star here is about student achievement, even in the midst of the 101 major logistical decisions that need to be made, that they're centered around making sure that we're securing student achievement through this whole process.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. If there are no further comments, Ms. Rout, please take the vote.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Danzy?
Yes.
Ms. Ahaya Hinton?
Yes.
Ms. Fix Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Huang?
Yes.
Dr. McColgan?
Yes.
Dr. McGinley?
Yes.
Dr. McIver?
Yes.
Vice President Walker?
Yes.
President Wilkerson?
Yes.
Thank you.
This brings us to the end of our action meeting for the Board of Education. When we adjourn the board's meeting, we'll convene a meeting of the intermediate unit. But at this point, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Education?
So moved.
Madam President, before we do that, I would just like to ask, I just got a sort of an alert that at 8 o'clock, persons were going to be looking out their window and applauding our first responders, our medical. And so I would like to ask for all of those who are out there listening that at 8 o'clock, they do give those heroes our thank you.
Thank you. We certainly look forward to participating in that because they are going above and beyond.
Absolutely.
And we hopefully will be finished before it.
Oh, you have little
I move
great
the
faith,
motion.
don't
I
you?
move the motion.
All right, come on, don't get ugly.
I want to second Vice President Walker's motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay.
Aye.
We'll now begin the meeting of the intermediate unit. Ms. Rout, please call the roll.
Ms. Danzy,
Present.
Ms. Hay Hinton,
Present.
Ms. Fix Lopez,
Present.
Mr. Huang,
Present still.
Dr. McColgan,
Present by phone.
Dr. MacGyver,
Present by phone.
Vice President Walker,
Present by phone.
President Wilkerson.
Present at 4:40. Thank you, Ms. Rout. Board members, before we proceed, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 27th, 2020 meeting of the intermediate unit?
So moved.
Motion
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
Thank you. Board members, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those opposed? The minutes are adopted. We have
I think I was skipped in the roll call, but I really am here.
Apologies. I thought I said you. I'm looking right at your picture on the screen.
You're trying to prolong this. We have 7 items for the intermediate unit. May I have a motion and a second to consider intermediate unit items 1 through 7?
So move.
Second. Vote second.
Are there any questions on any of these items? Any comments? I'm hearing none. Ms. Rout, please call the vote.
Thank you. Ms. Danzy,
Yes.
Ms. Hay Hinton,
Yes.
Ms. Fix Lopez,
I'm going to abstain on item 7 due to business relationships with UPenn, but yes on the rest.
thank you. Mr. Huang,
I am abstaining on IU number 7, and I'm a yes to the rest.
thank you. Dr. McColgan,
Yes.
Dr. McGinley,
Yes.
thank you. Dr. MacGyver,
Yes.
Vice President Walker,
Yes.
and President Wilkerson.
Yes.
Thank you. Items IU 1 through 6 passed unanimously, and IU 7 passes by a vote of 7-0 with 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you who tuned in during this difficult time, and I want to thank once more our educators, school staff, district staff, our parents' families, and the board's own staff for stepping up in this difficult situation that we'll get through if we hang together. At this time, we're planning to hold our scheduled April committee and action meetings. We don't have specifics about the time or the format, but we will be developing that and try to get those notices out as early as we can. Please check our website and social media for updates on these meetings, which will certainly change if required by our public health officials. I now want to adjourn this meeting of the IU. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting of the IU is adjourned. Have a great night, and please stay healthy.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.